What's going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning into this very special segment of Mi Casa, Su Casa, and I am your humble host, Niko House. And I have a very special guest. Kulinski of Secular Talk is here. I apologize for being 5 minutes late. To be honest with you, it's because we were doing exactly what you think we were doing. We were talking shit. That's exactly what we were doing. But I appreciate you coming on, Kyle. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, man, thank you for coming on. So just really quick before we get into all the nitty gritty of the stuff, you were kind of what a lot of people I don't think know if they're, because a lot of new people have come onto the scene of the YouTube politics. You were one of like the pioneers of being a progressive on YouTube, right?
Yeah, you make me feel old, man. I am kind of old. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I was a little bit, when I started, I was a little bit of a ripoff of two people. One of them being Bill Maher, and the other one being Jank. Like I kind of followed that model a little bit, and I just turned on the camera and started talking, and then started uploading in bulk. So yeah, I mean, I've been around for a while. The channel existed since 2008, but I've been doing it full time since about 2012, 2013.
Good stuff. I saw it, man. I saw one of your old setup with the one microphone here. You got the clip on. I
got like 32 mics.
Man, I saw that laptop. I was like, "Ooh, that's a brick." I don't even know how you upload videos with that thing. Good God, but hey, man, look, dedication and obviously timing at the it all paid off, and you're definitely one of the more respected voices. Basically, everybody has their opinion. They always rank you in the top 2, and they always kind of use you as a litmus test. Even myself, I always say there's a set of journalists to the left of you and to the right of you, and for the most part, you're pretty spot on. And for the journalists that are to the left of you, or if they consider themselves more left of you, you're normally in agreement with 90% of what they have to say, which is a great thing. And it's hard to be that consistently good for almost 7, 8, 9 years. And so congratulations on that. And I saw that you're passing a lot of people, and at least and the viewership is definitely passing.
Well, thanks a lot. I really appreciate that. And I just found and I think you do the same thing, which is why I like your show. All you have to do is, even if I'm wrong about something, I will tell everybody exactly what I'm thinking about it. And I think people inherently respect that, and they can sense when you're just telling it how you see it. Whereas, sometimes if you watch hosts and they're not doing well, or they're like, you could always sense when there's multiple layers removed of thought. Like,
when they're being purposely disingenuous.
Public positions and private positions. Like, everybody knows that the stuff I'm saying on camera is the exact same stuff that I'd say off camera. And so they get the sense like, oh, okay, even if I disagree with Kyle, I can respect where he's coming from. And so thank you. I really appreciate you saying that.
And it's funny because I've noticed that you and I, Jimmy as well, and a couple of others are kind of the few progressive ones that have a mixture of both. Not even just conservative, like Trump followers, like solidly Trump based, and almost an even mixture of progressives as well. And even if they may disagree with me on one subject or another, like, hey man, I fundamentally or ideologically they say, well, I don't agree with you with this social issue, but I know that you're genuine, so it makes me want to hear your point out. And I think that's what a lot of people get from you as well. Because that's definitely how I felt whenever I was just getting into the YouTube news and I was watching the show. I'm like, man, this dude knows his stuff, and it seems like he's coming from a genuine place, and it wasn't like this, pre-rehearsed. This is a narrative, we must stick to it no matter what.
Yeah, I'm like allergic to that when I see people doing that. Like, oh, I'm just gonna say what I think people want me to say, or what I think I'm supposed to say to stick to a narrative. I can sense that from a mile away, and I really dislike it. And to your point, yeah, there are people, I mean, they're legit like some tankies who follow me. I have anything, you can go all the way to communists, to social democrats, to democratic socialists, to, people like you said, there are some people who are right-leaning. One of the funniest things is when I was at Politicon last time, there's this dude who turned around. He was a black dude wearing a Make America Great Again hat, which already is like, what?
In public. Look,
yeah, in public. And then he turned around and he noticed me, and he was like, oh man, I like you. He's like, I don't usually agree with like lefties, but I don't hate you. I was like, all right. I thought that was a big compliment from them. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, all you can ask for is if people accept your positions and your show and what you're saying, as long as we are not compromising our values in the process of it. It's not like I'm trying to get right-wing followers by just telling them everything they want to hear.
Yeah.
It's that they might find 15% of things where they're like, that's interesting, and I kind of agree with that, even though I disagree with them 85, 90% of the time or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And that's all we could ask for in this game.
Exactly. Just, if you're ideologically consistent, most people won't hate you for your opinion. Like, I've noticed, funny enough, Ben Shapiro's numbers, I mean, they've been going back up because the election is getting closer, but like, he's been dropping because he's not ideologically consistent at all.
That's right. That's very true, man.
Like, remember, and it's funny because I was actually going to do a video on it, and then you had covered it, and that's why I was like, oh man, I'm going to definitely cover this. When he was like, it's an objective fact that Ilhan Omar is anti-Semitic, and I was like, I don't think that Ben Shapiro has any idea what objective fact means. That's the first thing I thought. And then you did a video literally doing the exact same thing.
Man, he's a hack. He really is. And it's so obnoxious. I mean, like, there was a time, and the same thing happened with Glenn Beck. He was pretending like, I'm an anti-Trump conservative. Like, I'm taking a principled stand against this guy. And then after a certain amount of time with Trump in office, they slowly but surely bent the knee. And they
met right in the middle, all of them. Trump did too. Trump bent the knee, and because he started moving lockstep with the establishment. And Ben, it's funny because he hated Trump so much which, by the way, he got paid to do. I found that out from an old friend of his who used to work at Breitbart with him. Yeah, my friend Lee Stranahan used to work at Breitbart, and he was like, yeah, Ben Shapiro's a hack. His dad used to write articles about like defending him, and then he would get paid to. That's how he ended up eventually splitting off and being so successfis right out the gate, because he was paid to trash Trump because they perceived Trump as being anti-establishment at the time.
Yeah, his particular strain of conservatism, I'm convinced, is a dying movement anyway, because it's called movement conservatism. It's George W. Bush's conservatism, and it's like Ted Cruz's conservatism. And basically, in my opinion, they're pretty much wrong about everything. Like, if you look at like libertarians, okay, I could agree with them on maybe 40% of their positions when it comes to social issues. They're on the whole like live and let live position. I'm with that 100%. And even when you look at like paleo conservatives, they're sometimes like, they're willing to not do endless free trade and outsourcing, and they want to have some protections for workers. So I'm good with that too. And sometimes these people are not in favor of endless wars. And okay, I'm with you on that too. But with somebody like Ben Shapiro, he's just reliably wrong on every issue. He wants to go to every single war. He sings rah-rah capitalism all day long and is in favor of unfettered laissez-faire capitalism and deregulation like crazy. And it's just amazing how, like, any issue you pick, like, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but if you have a fundamental disagreement with me on 100% of the issues,
100%. Like, it's almost like he's going out of his way at certain points to be wrong on the issues. Because what's wild to me about Ben, and it's funny, we're gonna get into that. We're gonna get into the discussion in a second. The debate discussion, that's been a little fun on Twitter, I've seen. But I watched Ben's debates, and I watched him actually debate Cenk one time, and I'm thinking like, this should be easy, right? Because I mean, Cenk, he may not. People may not think he's the smartest bulb in the box, but he's a leftist, and it's easy to win on these issues that Ben is literally wrong on 100% of the time, I thought. So when Ben does this, he builds up, right? And he sounds so intelligent as he's building up to this conclusion that you're like, okay, I'm following. And then his conclusion has nothing to do with the buildup.
That's a great point.
It is the biggest, he makes the largest logical leaps that I have ever seen. And because he talks fast, everybody just believes it.
That's right. You nailed it 100%. I mean, he did that with Cenk on the issue of money and politics. He basically ended up saying something like, well, you have a private business. And Cenk's like, what? Like, he was caught so out of left field that he didn't know how to respond, because he's like, Cenk was arguing against money and politics. And then somehow Ben Shapiro ended up conflating that with like just him running a private business or something. He's like, that's not the same issue. But like you said, he talks so fast that people think like, he's confident, he's talking fast, he's got to be right.
Yeah, nah. Well, and it's funny because so on the topic of the best debater that apparently the Progressive Voice has started, so I'm gonna give my opinion. On this.
Please do.
First of all, I don't even understand truthfully why David Pakman and Sam Cedar are in the same discussion with you in Destiny. Like, and that's that's a fact. And the reason why I say that is because they're like, well, he hasn't had, Kyle hasn't had, a lot of debates with different people. And I'm like, okay, so as a debater and as somebody who kind of thinks around the same logical patterns as you, I'm like, do you think there's a reason why he hasn't had as many debates as those people? That's what they don't think about. They're like, well, he hasn't had the experience. So how do we know he's the best debater? The moment that the left refuses to debate you, like all the biggest names on the left, because it's easy to debate people like Ben Shapiro, in my opinion. It's like a walk-off from like whenever Hassan dated Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk is a dumbass. He is an idiot who literally dropped out of college and thinks that he knows everything that's going on in college. He has no idea what the hell's going on in the real world. He's never lived in it. But so Hassan wiped the floor with him. Now, in all honesty, if you take like a Hassan or Cenk, whenever that happened, or Sam Cedar, and make Sam Cedar debate Kyle on Russiagate, he would get the floor wiped with him.
I mean, thank you. I appreciate that. Anytime anybody gives me a vote of confidence, I will always take it because I think they're correct when they do that. So,
well, I mean, I think it's just, in my opinion, it's logical. I mean, they're like, you can't, two people out the gate, two people that got Russiagate completely and totally wrong. They can't even be in the running because it was simple. It was logic. If you were there, which I know both of them were, for, attentively paying attention to the entire narrative unfold, you couldn't have got it wrong unless you were being purposely obtuse, or you just don't lack the logical coherence to come to the right conclusion. But I mean, Jimmy came to the right conclusion. Jimmy always says he's not the smartest person in the world, but Jimmy knows how to read.
Yeah, if you're able to, in my opinion, if you're able to see things through, get rid of the partisan filter completely. And listen, partisan filters, I think they're like training wheels. So like when I was younger, did I have a partisan filter? Yeah, I did. I'll admit that. I did when I was younger.
Yeah, I think everybody does.
I think they're intellectual training wheels. And then eventually you get to the point where you're able to try your best to be as objective as possible and not first see things through a partisan biased perspective. So I think that's one of the things that was very frustrating to those of us on the left who, were saying the right stuff about Russiagate from the beginning, is that unfortunately so much of the dialogue on the left was through those partisan blinders, and it led people down some really weird paths.
Really weird paths.
And on the debate point, listen, to me, and I know people say this is cocky and arrogant or whatever, but that stuff is easy to me. Like, it's not, I don't like debating, and the fact that I don't like debating is one of the reasons why people think I'm so good at debating, is because I
100%. I get exactly what you mean. I debated Anomaly the other day, and he reminded me why I don't debate YouTubers.
Yeah, because you want to correct. You have this urge to correct the record. Like when somebody says something so crazy, you're just like, no. Like, I have to explain why that's wrong, and let me break this down in as quick a way and as straightforward a way as humanly possible. And you mentioned Destiny before. I love Destiny. I think he's great at debating. But the point that I made is, I find he's great at poking logical holes in his opponent's argument.
Yeah, that's
what
not
I
the same
haven't seen
thing.
him do a lot of is build his own case for his own positions on things, which in my opinion is step 2 of debating. Step 1 is, I'm going to dismantle the stuff that was just put in front of me that's ridiculous.
And it can't even just be hole poking. Like, that's what people don't really get. You can poke 50,000 holes, but if the water jug is 50,000 gallons and 10,000 holes ain't going to do nothing. You got to be able to rip a hole in that thing. And that's a huge part. Like, I used to do, American Parliamentary Debate Association.
I don't, but it sounds official.
Bro, that's where, unfortunately, it used to be super conservative. So that's where like Ted Cruz used to debate in college.
Oh God,
it used to be exclusively Ivy League. It's still mad elitist, but the VP of McKinsey came from there.
Oh my goodness,
it's like that. I used to be in there in college, and like you can poke holes all day, and you can even build up your argument. But if you don't successfully tear theirs down, like fundamentally, then there's nothing to be discussed about what your argument is until you can, tear down that affirmative. And that's true. I've never seen, and Destiny's really good at poking holes.
He's really good.
But I feel like he's just like he's a cynic, basically. He's a very intelligent cynic.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But if you can't then build an argument to favor your side, like I guess like if you can't build an affirmative argument to favor your side, then all the holes you poke doesn't do anything. It just creates a vacuum. Okay, so we're both wrong. Now what?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. And that's what happened in that debate I did with that conservative YouTuber Razorfist on the issue of healthcare. That's why you could see it's a clinic in exactly what you just described right there. Because I take what he gives me, which is BS example. He literally used Stefan Molyneux's, experience with the Canadian healthcare system and try to make the claim that the Canadian healthcare system is not good or whatever. And so I, of course, dismantled that argument, and then I immediately went on to build the case for Medicare for all, like immediately after that in a smooth transition. And that's why, the dude still gets tweets today where they're like, people are like, you should just retire, bro.
Yeah, I had to debate. Look, I debated two people. I debated Matt
I gotta look at these. Are these on YouTube?
They're there, man. They're there. I debated Matt Christensen. This dude, and it was about the Michael Bennett situation in Las Vegas. How basically, I'm like, if you're talking about, because he basically tried to shred Bennett and then even Colin Kaepernick somehow in the same process. When he got arrested in Las Vegas and tackled by cops, and like there's a bunch of people running, but the one they went after was a big black dude. Yeah. And that was basically, so it was a philosophical debate for the most part. And I was basically building up the case that like, basically, we're in a time right now. If you see a guy get arrested out of 150 people that are also running, and that's the only person that gets arrested, you have to assume race plays a part at this point, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was building up the case using a bunch of different statistics, talk about red line, blah 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 blah. I even talked about a Harvard study that showed that corporations were not hiring black people because they believed they had a higher likelihood of doing drugs, and it turned out it was the total opposite. It was the white males that actually had a higher likelihood of doing drugs when it was all said and done. You know what he said about the Harvard study? He said, I don't believe that.
Ugh.
I was like,
you win the debate right there.
I guess, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, hold up. So you don't like, because it's one thing if it was just that in a vacuum. But when you have a bunch of different examples and then people don't want to acknowledge it, it's like, why am I even doing this debate? Like, I thought that it was going to be a genuine engagement. And I always make that dumbass mistake. I did the same thing with Anomaly. Anomaly was trying to say that Medicare for all had a mandate similar to Obamacare. And I was like, first of all, I used to work in health insurance. That's not true at all.
Yeah,
the policy that required the mandate for Obamacare is actually in the bill, and it is specifically defined as it pertains to the bill. So he's trying to go to Google, right? Bro, he said, I'm going to define, this is what Webster's definition of a mandate. I said, oh my fucking God.
Webster.
That's who I'm going to go to, Webster. If Webster said it, it's got to be a fact. Fuck all these academics who literally invested hours and hours into this rhetoric. And so he said, and then I was like, look, bro, the mandate is part of the policy. He told me, and I bullshit you not, you got to watch. He says, Obamacare isn't a policy. I'm not even joking.
What?
Bruh. I'm like freaking out. I'm like, bro, you're joking, right? You did not just say that.
Disingenuous at that point. And that's the thing. The other thing is, and I'm sure you'll agree with this too, what I do is if I get something wrong in a debate, I can admit it. Like, I'll be like, yeah, I'm wrong. I was wrong about that part. And then we'll move on and I'll explain and we'll move forward from there. But like, that's one of the things, like what you're describing right now, the fact that they went to that extent to try to defend their position as opposed to just conceding that point is probably one of the main reasons why they sound like terrible debaters.
Yeah, like they can't concede a basic point.
Right.
Even in the middle of the Medicare for all section of the debate, because the debate was really about who's more establishment, Bernie or Trump. Yeah, I know it's not even fucking close.
Yeah,
but I entertained it because it was supposed to be a genuine conversation.
Yeah,
you know. But he said, I said, where you get that there's this mandate that you're talking about? He was like, you can even ask Bernie or even Google it, bro. So I go directly to Sanders Institute's site, and I'm like, bro, there's no mandate here. And he's like, oh, bro, that's such a joke. I stopped the argument. I said, hold up, everybody, do me a favor. Go to sandersinstitute.com/XYZ and let me know what this website says. And he's like, oh, bro, you're such a joke, man. It's like you're exposing yourself, bro. I'm like, you said to Google it. And then when I Google it, you get upset. And he starts like laughing and like, you're talking over me. You're talking over me. I'm like, no. And it's crazy to me. I'm sure you've noticed this habit. It's crazy how quick conservatives, who are always quick to call someone else the victim, they're always victimizing themselves. They always make themselves the victims.
Oh, they love that shit. They bask in that all day long, man. They love it. They love to play the victim. They also contradict themselves all the time. Like the whole like anti-social justice warrior movement. Like Destiny made a good point about it. He was like, yeah, but so they used to say back when all like the main characters in video games were like straight white men. Like the arguments they used to use is like whatever, who cares? It's fine that it's like this. Who gives a shit who the main characters are? It's just video games. But then as soon as they started making video games that had more diversity for the lead characters, then their argument became like, I can't believe that they're picking people who are like non-white males for these positions. And Destiny was like, well, hold on, but if you're consistent in your position, then why aren't you saying who cares when it's not white men anymore? Like, if you were consistent, you would say, I don't care when it's white men, and I don't care if it was all, black women. It doesn't matter. Like, why do you now care? Like, the reality is they didn't actually believe that. That was the rationalization that they had because they liked the status quo. So they were just trying to defend the status quo. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it's funny because with Ben Shapiro has like kind of, I feel like he sparked it. The whole social justice warrior thing, people believe is limited to the left. And I'm like, because I know that it exists on the left. You'll never hear it. I'm like, because it get on my damn nerves. I get pissed about it. But the funniest thing is like Ben Shapiro is damn near infinitely worse because he's even grown out of doing the news. He's not even trying to report anymore. He's like, wow, I've learned because of people like Steven Crowder and Alex Jones and XYZ that if I just complain and whine about these random, like the random bullshit that some people on the left in the margins do that is not at all representative of the left, I can get more views that way.
That's right. And they mirror, all of a sudden now they mirror the tactics. Like they used to pretend to be so against this outrage culture, and now they do the outrage. And then also they'll turn a blind eye when one of their own, violates what they say their deepest held principles are. That's why I kept bringing up the fact that, Donald Trump sued The Onion over a satire article about him. He sued Bill Maher over a joke about him. Like, if you say you care about free speech, you can't say that this dude is on your side or he's some sort of free speech leader. He's not. Like, and by the way, if they really believe, like, okay, so one of their big things is free speech on college campuses. You know how quickly they would flip on that if we announced that there's like some Antifa speaker going to a campus?
Quick, so
they would immediately be like, or have somebody who's, has who has some sort of a record that they disagree with,
Yeah.
Then all
100%. Oh my God. I witnessed it happen at UNC, like right in front of my eyes. And it's funny because even at UNC, whenever we had some conservative speaker from Canada coming and spewing his nonsense about how race is an illusion and blah, 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 blah. And they weren't expecting me to show up because I was president for Carolina Students for Bernie Sanders. So I showed up and I'm listening and I'm like kind of laughing. And he kind of finally, but I'm like trying to keep to myself. But some of the shit he was saying was so idiotic that I couldn't help it. And as the only black guy in the room, of course, people wanted to know how I felt about it. And so when he asked me, well, what do you find a problem with? I start breaking down everything he said and why it was wrong. Because you know how conservatives like to talk about everything like in a vacuum, like if all things were equal, when we know for a fact that's not how life works. Man, look, he started whining. Then the president for Carolina's Republicans started whining, saying that I wasn't letting their guests talk. I was asking too many, what do they call them? Malicious questions. I'm like,
malicious questions. So like, they need a safe space. They need a safe space.
Oh my God, yeah, they love safe spaces now. Like that's what, like it's crazy. I like Steve Crowder was debating some kid about socialism. And I was watching the video. The kid was dismantling him.
Yep.
And then you saw it too. And the kid was getting snarky because Steven Crowder was being a dick. And then when the kid started mimicking him, all of a sudden it's, oh my gosh, why are you being rude? Why are you being rude? I'm not being rude to you. I'm like, oh my God, bro.
Yeah, see, they will flip immediately on their principle. So another example, I just covered this story not that long ago. It was in Arizona at some university. There were these Border Patrol speakers who were going to like give some sort of an address or whatever. And then there were protesters who, like left-wing protesters who were basically saying like, fuck the Border Patrol. Well, guess what? We learned a few days later, the protesters were arrested and then they were charged. So now, hold on. If you,
I didn't see that on Bill Shapiro channel.
Now, if you really care about freedom of speech, the first thing you would say is, yeah, okay, you know what? Border Patrol might not agree with them, but they have a right to speak. But here's what's for damn sure. You're allowed to protest if you want to protest, and you definitely shouldn't be arrested because you protested. I don't even care how. It could have been the most disruptive protest ever. To give somebody a criminal record over protest, that is literally against the First Amendment. Literally against the First Amendment.
Yep, it's 100% true. And you don't see, I mean, literally, some of my friends have gotten felonies for protesting. And so when you think about that, and then the silence from like the Ben Shapiro's of the world, luckily Ben Shapiro's and those type of commentators I've noticed don't really have politically active like fans. They go to YouTube to laugh because they think that they rule. I mean, they do rule the world to a degree, but they think that things will just work out for them because they've been, douchebag white males and have now not dealt with any consequences thus far. They doubt things are going to change anytime soon, which, might be a little true, but they're not politically active. And that's why if you try to have like a logical discussion with them, which I learned very early on when I got on YouTube, you don't do it. You don't have logical discussions with the Ben Shapiro types of the world. But the good thing is, and I don't know if you've noticed this too, like I said, the Ben Shapiros and those type of people are falling out of favor with the average American conservative.
Agree totally, man. Agree totally. Look at what happened with Rafe Dubin. I mean, hit over time, he's just kind of like petered out a little bit because everybody knows he's a hypocrite. I mean, again, Mr. I care about free speech and all that stuff. Has he ever spoken about the fact that there's over 20 states in this country where BDS, they're officially legally cracking down on BDS, where you're not allowed to get a government contract if you support a boycott of Israel?
Mm-hmm.
Never said a goddamn word about it. You want to know why? Because he fucking loves Israel. So, God forbid he actually speaks up on a legit, again, this isn't just the principle of free speech. This is an issue where it's like the legality of free speech, and he's silent on it. So these, I mean, I think
it's literally the government, because they always talk about free speech on college campuses. I'm like, first of all, technically the First Amendment has nothing to do with that, technically speaking. But you have instances right now where the government is literally violating the First Amendment.
Literally, and that's what that is. And he's got nothing to say about it. So I think people realize, they smell that hypocrisy, man. And then also, when was the last time he had a legit leftist on? Like, legit leftist.
Oh, man.
He had on Jimmy back when he, first started that show. And since then, he cited, like, Sam Harris and Majid Nawaz as people who, I've had on these leftists. Are you kidding me? That's your go-to example?
Yeah, that's not really the best example. For the longest time, I didn't know who Sam Harris was, and I thought he was on the right the way people on the left talked about him, to be honest with you. Yeah. So I didn't know until recently that, until a couple of months ago, that he was actually on the left. So now I want to go into this Russiagate conversation. We've seen, and we'll talk about Julian Assange too. We've seen this story develop crazy over the last 2 to 3 years. Congratulations, because you were definitely one of the maybe 3 super popular YouTubers that got it right. You got it right. Jimmy got it right. And Aaron Mate, when he was on, he still got it right. But when he was on Real
News,
Real News, he got it right too. And Abby Martin, of course, and those people. So congratulations on that. That's a big, big deal. Hold up, before we get started, people have a lot of questions to ask you. They hit me with the super chats like crazy. It says, question for both you gents: how important is the legalization of marijuana to be included in the Green New Deal? The energy requirements for indoor growing will be considerable and allows for opportunities in renewable. Well, that's a really loaded question. I'll let you answer that to the best of your ability.
Okay. So I think you're gonna like my answer on this, Niko, because I've been thinking about this quite a bit recently. Now, I said originally, when I looked at the layout of the Green New Deal, I said the same thing that Jimmy said and the same thing that many other people said, which is, I don't understand why they put so many things in this one piece of legislation. They put Medicare for all in there. They put an amalgamation of left-wing policies in there. Now, I support all those policies individually, but I think if we're gonna have a bill that's supposed to be like the New Deal, but also address climate change, we should do that. That should be its own thing. So I actually think Tulsi's off act in terms of dealing with climate change is preferable to just a Green New Deal. Now, I would still do a Green New Deal. I would just make it so that it's basically a green technology bill, a renewable technology bill, and an infrastructure bill at the same time. That's what you do for that.
Funny enough, that's literally what the off act is. That's
exactly. Okay, so perfect. That's what I would support. Now, in terms of legalizing marijuana, let's just do it separately. That should just be a separate thing.
Yeah, Tulsi also has a bill on that. Man, before we go into Russia, hold on. So from Julian Bonfiglio, I always pronounce this guy's name wrong. He says, "Hey Kyle, would you consider debating David Pakman on Russiagate, Ilhan Omar, Tulsi Gabbard, etc.? Just seems like he's more and more been MSNBC light these last couple of years. You and Niko rock."
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against that. In terms of the Russiagate thing, I feel like since I did it already with Jank, and I kind of want to move on from that in terms of the future, I'm not sure I'd focus on that, but the other issues I'd have no problem debating him on.
Yeah. I mean, once again, I don't know if he wouldn't do that. He would never do that. He wouldn't do it. I would love to see it. He wouldn't
prioritize it, but if I asked him, he'd be like, "Yeah, fine, why not?" But some of those things, I don't think he wants to be known as the dude who kept going after Ilhan Omar. You know what I mean? I think he just said things that were against her and that didn't characterize her fairly, in my opinion. in segments that he did, but I don't know if he'd want to plant a flag and be like, yeah, I'm the anti-Ilhan Omar guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that what he's primarily asking you is to debate his ideological inconsistencies.
Yeah,
I think that's what
to debate him because he's a lot more centrist than me.
Yeah, way more centrist.
Sure.
He's more centrist than some right-wing people when it comes to certain things. When he was like, bro, he was banging the drums for Venezuela. Like he was banging them. Like ready to go.
I watched some of his stuff on that, and I totally disagreed with him.
It's like, what the It's like, Dave, bro, you have so many friends that have the right opinions. Watch any of their videos, please. Literally any of them, and they will have it more right.
And then think about how they would, not Dave in particular, but other people that agree with him, the way that they smugly dismiss our opinion simply by saying like, oh, you're pro Maduro. It's like, what?
Like, I don't even know what that
fucking
means.
Summation of our position? Like, that's how you would describe it.
Yeah.
Like, you think
Ignore all the facts.
You think that's fair? You think that's fair?
Yeah. Well, it's we're pro Maduro in the same way that I guess Tulsi is pro Assad, I guess. That's one of the wildest smears I've ever heard, bro, because it wasn't even until recently that I have because we're doing so much and we're reading so much information that the simple connection, like, hold up, wasn't Tulsi supposed to be doing this because she's like on the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee? Like, does anybody else on the Foreign Affairs Committee who does think like, visits leaders that we don't necessarily agree with all the time, do they get criticized in the same way?
No, even if she wasn't on that committee, I would still support her doing that. Like that should be done. Like 100%. That should be done.
So let's I wanted to talk about this off act while we're on the subject of Tulsi, and not just the off act, but basically, and I would love to know your opinion about this objectively. Right now, it looks like if you go on a bullet point by bullet point basis, Tulsi's the most progressive candidate in the race. And I know that you kind of, you're backing Bernie, which obviously you have, it's smart to do so. But like, just if you were talking about all the extenuating circumstances that are surrounding the election right now, who do you believe is the most progressive out of everybody running?
I still think it's Bernie. I think we have a slight disagreement on this. Now, if you want, I can run through the things that I really like about Tulsi, and then the things that I think.
No, I would love to hear.
Okay, so first we'll talk about the things that I think are great about Tulsi. She was an early supporter of Medicare for All, which is super important because it shows you it's not like she just kind of later on was like, yeah, sure, Medicare for All. She was an early supporter, so she gets massive credit for that. She's of course for legalizing marijuana, as you said. I love her paper ballots bill. I think that's a brilliant bill. Also, because at the same time that a bunch of idiots were screaming about, a Russian attack on our democracy, her response to that was like, well, there's an easy fix here. Like, here's the actual fix. Instead of just yelping about the problem and trying to do it for political gain, let's propose solutions. So here's a solution. I like that she was one of very few Congresspeople to vote against the rules package because it had PAYGO in it. You remember that? I thought that was very important.
Like the only progressive that I think that voted.
It was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Tulsi Gabbard, and I think Ro Khanna. But I thought
AOC did it and she took a huge hit for it. I thought she voted for it.
No. She voted against it.
Or was it Ilhan? It was Ilhan who voted for it.
Ilhan voted for it. That's right. It was Ilhan. That's correct. And now, of course, another reason I love Tulsi is that she was an early supporter of Bernie. And I think that some people might look at that and say like, well, duh, like she should have been. And that was pretty obvious. But no, what people need to understand is political context. It's easy if you're a regular person somewhere in the middle of the country or whatever to say Bernie's the best candidate. I'm going to support Bernie. She was doing it inside of the belly of the beast. She was doing it when it's nothing but massive pressure from above trying to push all the elected Democrats towards supporting Hillary Clinton. Almost like to the point where you get excommunicated if you don't bend the knee to Hillary Clinton. And she did the right thing. So massive credit on that. And,
for more context, she was next in line. Like she was supposed to be the next one up after Hillary to run.
So what we see here is a pattern. The pattern is she's willing to, basically put careerist aspirations aside. Is aspiration the word I'm thinking of? I think that's right.
Yeah, career aspirations.
Yeah, aspiration. I don't know why I was. Sometimes you say,
I know, it sounded weird.
So
yeah, I get what you mean.
She puts that aside and she's willing to do the right thing regardless of the fallout. And that another example that is on Julian Assange, she did it. On Venezuela, she did it. I think she's the most forthright in coming out against regime change wars. Personally, I don't agree with criticism of her when people go after her for her stance on drones, particularly not because it's not a legitimate criticism, but because if you're going to criticize her on that, you also have to criticize Bernie on that.
And they never do.
And they never do. That's correct. So those are the positives. I think there's many positives. She's very high up on my list. Now, the negatives, and I'm going to pose a bunch of these as questions because I know you're a supporter and maybe you have more information on this that I don't have, and I'm always willing to be corrected if I'm wrong about some of this stuff. Now, the first thing is she always responds to this by basically saying, like, it's a bigoted attack. But my question is, when people bring up the Hindu American groups that support her, I always thought the concern was that they're right-wing groups and that they support Modi and he's a right-wing leader. And they're supporting Tulsi as well. So how do you respond to that criticism?
So in 2014, a few of these groups had donated to her, expecting to get some type of favor for her to vote for a bill that was actually going to strengthen ties between specifically Modi and his regime and America. Tulsi actually voted against that.
Okay,
because she just doesn't believe in if we try to strengthen ties with Israel, she would vote against that because fundamentally she doesn't agree with America getting involved with other countries' politics in that level.
Okay.
And so there were some, because she's Hindu also, so there is that reality. There are white supremacists who donate to Bernie, right? But do we so Bernie has to disavow every white supremacist? No, we know, especially because he's done it over and over again, the same way that Tulsi has, she said, I don't support any type of bigotry. And she, even in 2016, whenever David Duke and Richard Spencer tried to, hell no, I don't want your endorsement. Take this shit somewhere.
I never brought up the guilt by association point because I don't agree with the guilt by association point. I mean, it's theoretically possible for Richard Spencer or somebody to see my foreign policy and say, I like him on that.
Yeah.
And it's so what? He's still a prick. I still hate him. And Tulsi's response was along those same lines. I don't like these people. I don't care about these people. So, okay. So that's I was going to say on a more fundamental level. So it's the same thing as if some, say in America, some groups from the, Muslim Brotherhood were donating to Iran. And then she was constantly and conveniently attacked by the media in a way that she had never been attacked before because of some random group that there is no tangible association with deciding to donate to her because she has the same religion as them, and that might be the only Muslim running, and then us constantly questioning her. Well, do you disavow the Muslim Brotherhood? Do you disavow the Muslim Brotherhood? Do you disavow Islamic extremists? The world would be freaking the fuck out if that was being asked. That's a fair point.
But that's because we're a little bit more sensitive at this point because we've seen it so much to Islamophobia. We know exactly what it looks like, and we also know what the dog whistles sound like. However, we had not been this exposed to Hindu phobia, which I didn't even know was a big deal until I started doing some research recently. It is a big deal. And after a while, or if that's what I'm saying, if I, do you disavow Farrakhan? You're both black. Why do I have to disavow Farrakhan if I don't echo any of his sentiments? If nothing I've done ever reflects his belief system. So after a while, we get exhausted.
I think you're making all these points are fair. The only slight distinction I would make is if there are individuals who happen to be donating, like the example you gave, Muslim Brotherhood and Ilhan Omar, that's one thing. I think the reason why some people were concerned, because I don't think all of the people who were concerned about this, it was flat out bigotry. I think some of them were thinking, why are right-wing Hindu groups donating to Tulsi? And I think there is a distinction between individual versus group, because then the concern is, okay, well, what policy favors would these people be getting? But from what you're explaining to me right now, basically what you're saying is she didn't do anything in return for that. And also, does she take the money from, right-wing?
No, she doesn't take any type of groups like that. She doesn't take any money. She has the most progressive finance. She doesn't, even Bernie takes PAC money, although caveat, I'm pretty sure it's from Our Revolution. Or union. Exactly. So but she doesn't take anything like that. And it's funny enough. So when I was in LA at her rally, there was a big quote unquote anti-Hindu nationalist group out there that were trying to protest Tulsi. So I go to ask, I said, well, look, man, how much money do you think Tulsi's getting? Cause I really want to know. Cause I knew a little bit about the campaign finances, and I wanted to hear how much that was. She was getting hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. I said, whoa, double back, bro. Hold up. What do you mean hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars? She was like, hundreds of thousands of dollars from Nintendo. No. I said, no. I need the exact number and the exact group. And they couldn't give me the information.
Sure,
because I was aware of who donated to her in 2014, but also I know who donated to a lot of people in 2014, 2015, and more. And here's what kind of like put me. I was like, okay, now I get it now. Kamala, because everybody gets mad at me when I pronounce the name of her name. Kamala.
You say it like the old school wrestler. That's how you
say it.
Man,
me too. She is actually Indian. She actually does have a love for Farrah Modi that she is unabashed about. She actually has stronger ties to India. Her aunt actually comes from India frequently to campaign for her. Like, she has strong ties to the country, specifically strong ties to Modi, and nobody has ever had anything to say about it because the original critique came from neoliberal media.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. I mean,
she's actually Indian.
She is unfairly maligned across the board. I think Tulsi is. I think corporate media treats her like she can't get through a single interview without being asked like why she loves Assad or something preposterous like that.
And I think specifically with the Hindu thing, it gets exhausting. Like,
no, I understand. Yeah, I think you made good points there. I'll take that off the list of things that I thought were potential negatives.
Mm-hmm.
How do you respond to the criticism of the vote on Syrian refugees?
So the way she framed it was that because we did not have a clear vetting process in place before the vote was asked, it was being used as a political tool, which at the time I even agreed with, although I was still in favor of voting for the refugees. And the fact that she said she knew that a lot of these refugees, we're funding a totally different opposition group than the actual opposition in Syria, which I learned from her, which is why she started coming out so hard against Trump, that the news is kind of burying. The opposition group that was originally, having problems with Assad was because it was over religious. It was like over religious purposes. Had nothing to do with like the terrorists that are there blowing shit up. A lot of those people were also trying to get into the United States. So she didn't feel comfortable until there was an established vetting process that was going like a line by line detailed vetting process that would have vetted them correctly and make sure that none of these rebels, none of these terrorists that we were funding were basically trying to use this as a vehicle to get into the States and bring whatever drama that they could bring. And so I understand it. I don't necessarily know if I 100% agree with it, but I see her logic behind it because it is consistent with all of her other logic.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see the timeline of the vetting process in the U.S. because I think it was under Obama. There was like an attempted terror attack in Kentucky or something. And so, you know how Trump was always talking about like extreme vetting on the campaign trail? Yeah. Obama actually set up a system where we had like some sort of extreme vetting. This kind of came up in my debate with Razorfist, which is why I'm kind of vaguely remembering parts of the policy. But we have like a very strict vetting process. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think, it makes sense to have a vetting process that's at a high level just so you know what's going on and have everything orderly and organized and whatnot. I don't think that's like anti-leftist to say we can have some sort of a vetting process for people who come in. But I'd be curious to see the timeline on that because my understanding was that we already had pretty decent vetting going back to the Obama administration.
But it was going to expedite it. Like, that's why it needed a whole separate bill.
Okay, so basically her argument is the reason why I voted this way is because at the time for this bill, there wouldn't be the same level of vetting for people coming in.
From Syria specifically, exactly.
Okay.
Which would have been problematic, especially now knowing at the time, I didn't even know we were funding terrorist organizations there. I didn't know we were funding the rebels.
We've been doing that for a long time.
I didn't know. I kind of thought that was the case, but Syria, like most things now, was getting one-sided coverage, and even my friends who were from Syria at the time not at the time, they're still from Syria. They didn't even know exactly what was going on. They're like, look, this quote-unquote civil war going on right now isn't even a civil war. They do know that because they're like, these people, they don't even speak the same languages as them a lot of the time or the same dialect as them. So they know they're not from Syria.
You get a very biased perspective in the U.S., and the biased perspective is in favor of the opposition. And they try to paint the opposition as like all freedom fighters across the board. And the reality is that when the Syrian civil war started, there was a brief window there where you had the FSA, the Free Syrian Army, which was relatively secular, had regular people who were kind of rising up against the Assad government. But what happened was, if a war drags on for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then longer, who's going to remain in the country to fight? It's not so-called moderates. It's actually now the strongest and largest fighting force there. From a study 2 years ago, they said 60% of the fighters are Islamist extremists.
Yeah.
So, and this is why I think Tulsi's actually been superb on this issue, is that she doesn't care about kind of walking this fine line in the middle and trying to pretend like by definition any kind of uprising is legitimate. No, she says these are terrorists and we're funding them and backing them, and that's a terrible idea. And this is just like in Iraq when we went and toppled Saddam, and anybody who spoke up against that was painted as a Saddam lover. And the same thing is happening today, and except take out Saddam and put Assad in. And so that's why she's she's on the receiving end of relentless smears, particularly on this issue. So I think she's led on this in a way that I think is very admirable.
And I think it's important to note that the opposition wasn't invented in 2012 when the war started. There had been, and once again, this was something, the latter part of what I'm about to say is something I learned from Tulsi, is that the opposition wasn't because Assad or his family was tyrannical. They were basically upset because the government had gone more secular. That was the main opposition, but it wasn't a violent one. And that's what people didn't get. And of course, the moment that we become the number one, giver of humanitarian aid to Syria, all of a sudden, terrorists and weapons just end up there. Isn't that coincidence? So that's what kind of was okay, wow. Okay. So there's, even though I thought I understood most of the layer, I'm wow, there's even another layer that isn't being considered, which is that both the opposition and the Assad government don't want the people that we have there.
Yeah, no, there's just massive amounts of information. I remember reading articles years ago that tried to say Assad was in bed with ISIS. And it's those are literally the main fighters against him. How little do you know about this?
Wow. I thought that Assad was there to fight. Oh, man.
But that's why it's so tough for Tulsi, is that there's so much misinformation out there that when she goes out there and says very basic things, people are like, how could you say that? And they act like she's pro-Assad, when in reality, her position, and she stated it repeatedly, is just hey, I think we shouldn't offensively attack anybody. We should only use our military for defense, basically. Yep. And people think that's unreasonable. No, that's the most reasonable standard I can possibly think of.
Yeah, 100% agree. It's insane. It's the trick they try to pull with Maduro, Assad. And and I've told people the simple way to look at it is that anytime they keep repeating a name over and over and over and over and over and over again, it's because they're lying to you. And they're trying to imprint the name and the connotation or the feeling that you get when you hear that name in your brain, so that the moment that you hear anything contrary to the narrative that has been established, it's almost a visceral reaction that you can't help but oh, there's something wrong. No. I mean, I have to be upset about this, and they don't even know why after a while. But it's just a form of conditioning that we've seen in the media where they all agree on certain buzzwords. Can you call Assad a war criminal?
Yeah.
How the fuck am I going to do that? We haven't even seen him in court.
What they're doing there is they're just trying to make her say bad things about the official state baddie. He's an official state enemy, so just bend the knee and say the things you're supposed to say that are basically, escalations. They want it unanimous in the US across the board that anytime the CIA and the military industrial complex and the deep state and the executive branch set their sights on this is the next place where we're supposed to do regime change, if you deviate from that line and you dissent, you are just relentlessly smeared, and they will come for you. So
and I think that's also I think it's a two-pronged attack. They know that if she gets that wrong, she loses support. If she gets it right, they can demonize her for it.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
And that's what they do. The same thing with reparations, right? They do the same thing with reparations with Bernie.
The whole day,
he gets it wrong at times, or at least he doesn't get it as right as people would like him to get. And the attacks are Bernie's against reparations, when it's it's a little bit more complicated than that. But they also don't say that all these other candidates are damn near 100% wrong on reparations. One. And on the flip side of that, which is what I find most interesting, is how many times have they asked Tulsi Gabbard about reparations?
None, right?
None. Zero. Even though she's the only one right now who's signed on to reparations legislation. And recently, after
they have other smears for her that they use.
Well, but it's because they want to create this idea, because it's going to be the narrative later on down the line. Of course, she has problems with black voters. That's what they're going to say, right? Because but that's the prevailing narrative right now with Bernie, which is also untrue. But they push the narrative to try and make it true.
That's right. I think that's all true. The people who Bernie struggles with the most, actually, when you look at the numbers, are older voters.
Old rich white people, actually.
That's right. Yeah. Old rich white people.
The total opposite of what they try to pitch. So
that's all very true.
So what's your other critique?
Okay, there's only a few more left here. The torture video. I know that her voting record is 100% against torture, but when she made those comments in the wake of the Senate torture report, turned my stomach, man. I didn't like what she said.
She actually clarified that on an interview with Jimmy, actually. It was a Jimmy? But she said she wasn't saying she was conflicted about torture. She was actually saying she was conflicted about the report because she hadn't even seen it yet. That report came out like 2 hours before she did the interview. Okay. So she had no idea what was in it. She didn't know what the hell was going on. She's like, I can't understand. She's like, I'm against any struggle of human life. I can understand like the most extreme circumstance where it's like your country's on the line or not, or you have to torture to get this information or the world's going to explode. I guess I can kind of see it, but like she did not know what the hell was going on. Basically, they caught her off guard with it. Okay. So that's what she said. That's what she meant by she was conflicted when she said that in the interview. Because I was kind of confused too. I'm like, hold on, because your voting record doesn't say that you're conflicted at all. It's like you made a decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'd be curious to talk to her about that as well, just to kind of
probe her on it,
get more of her thoughts on it, because I didn't like what I saw in that video, but I understand that her voting record is more important than anything else. So that's a pretty reasonable counterpoint. I just wish she never said that.
Yeah, I know. And it's kind of crazy because I'm sure when she said it, which a lot of politicians have said a lot of things that they didn't think would come back to haunt their ass in 2018, 2019. Like she was probably thinking like, oh man, I slipped up there. But look at my record. It'll be fine.
Yeah, you're not.
Did she ever say, she probably never thought in her life that she was going to have to clarify one segment or not even 10 seconds from one segment from 3 years ago.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's not like I'm not trying to make it seem like she's the only one that's had issues, because obviously, and this next point that I'm going to bring up, which I put in the negative column, this is another one of those issues like with the drone strikes where it does kind of apply to Bernie as well. In terms of Bernie for this next one, I don't know if he voted this way, but I do know that his comments at the time were pretty gross, and I remember covering them on my show.
Yeah, I did
what
too.
I'm referring to is there was a questionable pro-Israel vote during the 2014 Gaza massacre.
Yes.
She voted with a bill that the language of the bill was like, Palestinians need to stop using human shields and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, this isn't just about Tulsi. It speaks to a larger problem in Washington, D.C., where it's like, this still at this late date, this is like the one issue that seems to be like off the table. You know what I mean? Where people on the left even struggle. Like now you're starting to hear some of the right noises being made by some people. But even so, like when you go back and look at 2014, not that long ago, I covered a video of Bernie Sanders at a town hall where people are going after him and saying, like, you have to try to stop what's going on. You got babies being killed. You got innocent people being killed by the Netanyahu government. And his response is basically like, I don't know. What would you have Israel do? Like, they're under attack, and saying stuff like that. And it's just...
But that we were programmed pretty bad back then. Like, it wasn't until I literally was dating a hijabi woman from Palestine before she was telling me, like, look at the inconsistencies in the reporting. Like, I didn't even have to look at Father. Like, I was looking at CNN. She was like, look at the inconsistencies. And I was like, holy shit, you're right. And then she said something that, and she's not the brightest bulb either, but she was like, how are they the victims and they have a nuclear weapon and the strongest superpower in the world behind them? How does that make any sense?
Not only that, man, even if you look at like UK media, I remember covering stories at the time. It was better coverage in the UK media, where there was an article in the Independent where the headline was 80% of those killed were civilians. And it's like, damn. And
they're like, oh, they're using kids as human shield. And I've never even heard that verified.
That is just a bullshit dodge. And then, you know who made a great point about this at the time? Jank said, he was like, okay, if it's some sort of devious trap by Hamas, why does Israel always walk into it? So like the devious trap by Hamas is like, oh, we're going to use these kids as human shields, but somehow Israel always falls into the trap and always ends up killing the kids.
And they always know that there are kids being used. Like, how did you know then? And did you know this before you launched the fucking missiles at them?
Yeah, exactly. And they bombed literally like a hospital. They bombed the only power plant in Gaza. Like, it was insane what was happening at the time. So that, again, this is not just a criticism of Tulsi, it's also a criticism of Bernie, but it's just upsetting that even the best politicians that we have, we still got to basically keep an eye on from time to time and say, come on, what are you doing?
Well, that's why I think it's our responsibility, and there's very few of us willing to take that responsibility seriously and take it to heart, which is we have to criticize our politicians, because after a while, there's a level of ego that gets involved when you get to that level, right? It's like to the point where Bernie is, or AOC, or even Tulsi, there's like, you're getting worshipped daily. Like, you're getting attacked, but I mean, the worship kind of keeps you on your pedestal. And so you almost come to believe that you can't do any wrong. And so that was one of the things that like made me decide to go in Tulsi's camp, which I guess you have to have a personal interaction to kind of get to that level. But I was asking her about a speech that she had talked about and that she had done in 2012. She was just as commanding, just as powerful, very well spoken, but it was a different demeanor. She was telling people what to believe and what they should do. And now she's much more inquisitive. Like, she's almost like, I need you all to help me do these things because we can't. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
Well, no, I was just saying that so in 2012, that speech sounded like, that. And then I'm listening in 2019. I'm like, Tulsi, what changed? What was it from 2012 to 2019? I know it wasn't the deployments, because you still talk the same even after the deployments. It wasn't your first stint in Congress. What was it? She's like, honestly, it was me peeling back the layers of all the lies and all the misinformation that we're like, plagued with daily. It wasn't until I peeled back those layers and started looking actively for the truth that I kind of saw things for what they really were. And she's like, and I'm still learning more and more every single day. I don't think I'm close to finding out, everything. But for when she said that and acknowledged it, and then on top of that, I'm sure you've heard interviews and things like that where she actually says, I'm sorry for something that I voted for a belief that I once held. You don't ever hear politicians do that. Yeah. They pivot usually.
But she's doing it the right way. I mean, she's also very forward looking in that she seems the most open to using new media for her campaign.
Yeah, and not when it's just convenient.
She seems like it's like the most, like, I've seen her on multiple different, left-wing new media shows. And I think that that's very intelligent on her part, because she understands what a lot of Democrats don't understand, which is that that's actually where it's at. Like, Democratic voters are demographically young. Like, if Democrats turn out younger people, that's when they win elections. Yeah. Where are young people? They're online. So if you go online and you talk to all these shows like our shows, then you're opening up a whole new door and you're being exposed to a whole new audience. And that's the audience that you need.
Yep. Versus, have you been looking at your analytics too? It's becoming more so than it's ever been.
Yeah,
like
30%
of my audience between 18 and 25 now, and it's never been like that.
Yeah, I've always had a relatively young audience as well, and I think that's more not necessarily about our shows in particular. It's just the demographics of YouTube and online in general. So I think that's very intelligent on her part. Bernie half gets it, but I mean, face it, he's really old. That
I tell people that all the time.
It had to be explained to him. I'm sure. Like, they had to tell him, like, no, Bernie, this is it. Like, you got to do this. So
yeah, I have to tell people all the time too. Like, even when it comes to old votes, and some of his very archaic logic when it comes to, like, okay, if they got Iraq wrong, and then Bernie will get something like maybe Assange or even Syria wrong. I'm like, y'all have to understand, he's not on Twitter looking at our tweets at him and and like thinking, okay, maybe I should check this out. He's 77 years old.
The good news though is he has hired now a bunch of young people, which are good. Like, there's a bunch like Brianna Gray.
Yeah, Bree's good people.
Yeah, like
David's good people as well.
Yeah, so exactly. So thankfully I think he's gonna have the right people screaming in his ear. But it's tough, whether you're Bernie or you're Tulsi, they are under immense pressure because the establishment does not want them to win. They do. And I said it at the beginning. I said, watch, you're gonna see Bernie, Tulsi, throw Andrew Yang in there, and even Elizabeth Warren to a lesser degree. most of the media coverage of them will be negative. Hear me now, quote me later. And all the other Democrats, it will be overwhelmingly positive. And that's exactly what we've seen. Go look at the articles on the safe Democrats. Go look at the articles on Buttigieg.
Oh my God, that dude, I don't want to talk about that dude. There's not a dude, like, I was looking up his comments and his record. You can't look up his damn policies because he don't have any.
Exactly.
And I'm like, hold up, this dude sounds like a well-spoken version of Trump, basically. Like, but kind of worse on some issues.
He's trying to be Obama. He's like Beto. Like Beto and Buttigieg and a bunch of them are trying to be Obama 3.0 or 2.0.
Yeah. Forgetting that Obama damn near had a spotless record before he started running, which is why he was able to announce so early and they had nothing on him.
There you go.
Yeah, people don't ever consider that.
Did you see? I think actually TYT broke this story to their credit, but they were digging into Mayor Pete's record when he was mayor, and there's already a scandal they found.
There's like 2. He fired a police chief for exposing racism in the police department, and they didn't fire the 2 police that were involved in the damn racism.
How are you going to have a scandal already when you were just a mayor? Like, when you're a mayor, you just got to fix the potholes, dude. Like, that's your job. And you already have a scandal?
And man, look, in South Bend, Indiana, I wasn't that surprised to hear about this. I was like, it sounds about right. That's kind of what I expected to come out about him. But it's crazy because they will prop up, and they're clearly running through the list, right? They tried Kamala. That was an epic fail. They put every minute, dollar that they could saying that she's the front runner, believe us. Everybody like, no, she's not. No, she's not. And and I don't know if you've even noticed on Twitter, the bots have even started shifting. They always shift. And then it was Beto. Beto was next. Yeah, it was like, oh man, Beto. And then he waved his hands, knocked a few people out. They're like, no, we can't have Beto.
Now Buttigieg is getting the push.
I was Buttigieg. It was Amy Klobuchar for 2 days, and then then she hit, eating salads with fork or with combs and shit. So they were like, nah, she can't be. So then it's Buttigieg, and yeah, man, he ain't gonna make it that long either. They're trying, but listen, he's boring at the very least.
I did a video last night when I was watching the town halls, and I did it. It was a quick little cell phone video, and my conclusion is, and I know this is a bold prediction, but I'm saying it publicly. Everybody can hold me to it if I end up being wrong. My guess is that the centrist that will try to make a run at Bernie, I think Bernie's going to be the front runner the entire time. I think a centrist that'll make a run at him will be Kamala. I think she will.
I think she'll get a late minute resurgence.
I'll tell you why. She's more savvy than people give her credit for, and she can change on a dime to do the right strategy. And I noticed it yesterday because on the issue of Medicare for all, she now has her answer down properly, and it's a good answer. So she was asked a question that was framed in a super right-wing way, where somebody asked her, like, over 70% of the American people want to keep their private health insurance. So why are you in favor of, like, banning it or whatever? Yeah. And her response was basically, hey, listen, I'm for Medicare for all. She said that, and then she stopped, and then she continued and basically said, it's not that the American people like their health insurance companies, is that they like their doctor and they want to keep their doctor. Well, you can keep your doctor under Medicare for all.
She just took Bernie's talking point, basically.
But not only that, but wait, she actually ended up ultimately being even slightly more politically savvy than Bernie, because then Don Lemon chimed in, and Don Lemon said, but you want to ban private health insurance. Experts say that under your plan, under the plan you signed on for, over a 4-year period, that'll phase out private health insurance. And her response was, well, it's going to phase it out as the primary form of insurance because we're going to have Medicare for all and everybody's just covered as a baseline position. But I'm in favor of supplemental private healthcare. So if you want to get supplemental private insurance, you could do that.
Yeah.
And he was like, but it says you're going to phase it out. She's like, no. The bill says it allows for supplemental private care. So I looked at that and I was like, damn, because what Bernie does, and this is where, in my opinion, he fucks up here. When they phrased the question to him and said, you're in favor of banning private health insurance, and then they asked the question, and he didn't correct them. He wasn't like, well, actually, no.
He goes into defense mode, and rather than correcting.
He could have said, like, well, no, you could still get private supplemental care, and then answer about how good Medicare for all is. But what he did is he just went right to Medicare for all and didn't clarify that he doesn't ban supplemental care. So Kamala was actually more witty and clever with it. And I think that if she can show that kind of political savvy, which I think she will be able to on all the other issues, then she's going to be the one that I think is left standing, because there's no way. Beto, I'm sorry, he comes across as too fake. Buttigieg is too much of like the, hey, look at me, I'm Mr. Smart Guy. And it's just not that era anymore. We're in a populist anti-corruption era. And so I think that the only one that's really going to be able to make a little bit of a run is Kamala. And also, keep it real, I think for demographic reasons, I think older voters are going to like Kamala. You know what I'm saying? Like older voters will prefer Kamala. I think black voters will prefer Kamala as well. So,
I think, not compared to Bernie. Bernie is smoking her right now when it comes to black voters. It's insane. I was not expecting that. But we did rip her for like a good 3 weeks straight.
That's true. But I also think we need to be a little careful, though, because there's a difference between favorability versus will you get out and go to the polls and vote? Because that's slightly different. Bernie's doing wonderful with black voters right now in terms of favorability, but that needs to transfer into votes.
So I'll say this, on the ground, from whenever I've done like the organizing side, black people who found out about Bernie instantly, they're like, oh, what the hell? The problem with Bernie in 2015, 2016, people didn't understand. It wasn't that he was doing bad with black voters. It's that the truth of the matter is black voters are in a weirdly unique demographic where they don't have time to be on Facebook and Twitter trying to figure out who the real progressive is and who's really working for them. So they're consuming their information from CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, and they're like, well, these are the names being thrown out in front of me, and these are the people I know about. I mean, literally, when I was in North Carolina, I'm not gonna say the name, but somebody from the campaign that ended up being mad corrupt was actually trying to prevent the African American caucus chairwoman from seeing Bernie.
No.
Like to the point where Shannon Jackson, his field manager, had to jump in and be like, yo, what the hell are you doing? I was like, yeah, this is what they've been doing this entire time. And they were like, oh shit. And it was happening all over the country. So, but that was the only way they could keep black people from voting for Bernie, was to keep him out of their view.
Yeah. So do you think in the southern, Bernie got his clock cleaned in a few states last time? It was New York, California, and then a lot of the southern states where the Democratic voting population, primary population is predominantly black. Do you think, what's your prediction in terms of how he'll do?
I think that he'll smoke California. I will.
California, I agree, because the polls are showing that now. But what do you think about the South?
So in the South, he'll do much better. And I actually think that's why they push Beto to run. I think that's why they're keeping Andrew Gillum in the public's eye. And I think that's why they keep bringing up Stacey Abrams' name. And it's no coincidence that they got two black people from southern states that have high name recognition. And then they have Beto from a state that people forget has a shitload of delegates. So that they're hoping that he can take enough. Because like what happens is, Beto doesn't have to win every state. He just needs 15 to 20% from Texas. Kamala doesn't have to win every state. She just needs about 15 to 25% from California. Kirsten Gillibrand won't get the 15% in New York, I don't think, at this point. But there's a chance she might. At least that was the original plan. And then, of course, Stacey Abrams and Andrew Gillum will stomp for whoever the establishment favorite is at the time. When they get to the convention, they will then combine all those delegates. And it won't necessarily be a winning like combination, but the problem is it'll go to the second round because he doesn't quite make 50%. He'll get like 47% or 48%, but because of the 50% requirement, he won't get it, and he'll have to go to super delegates. So that's one of the reasons why people have been pushing for Tulsi so hard, is because we know for a fact she'll give her delegates to Bernie to get her over that hump. Yeah. And she'll also bring in, there's 35 open primary states. So because of that, there are a lot of conservatives right now who love Tulsi. They haven't been questioning them on surveys or any of these polls. There's a reason for that. 35 open primary states, coincidentally enough, the states that Bernie thrived in, obviously, and also the states that Tulsi is currently thriving in. And these are also the states where they don't have a Republican option to vote for in the presidency. And a lot of these people are pissed at Trump.
So let's say for a second that that's what happens, that Bernie doesn't get the 50%. And then it gets to the second ballot, and then the Democrats try to screw him. That's Donald Trump getting another 4 years.
Absolutely, 100%.
It's not even a question. Like, it's just a given.
Oh yeah, so, it might be the destruction of the Democratic Party too.
That might be a literal historic moment in American history where there's some giant, weird, bizarre political realignment or something strange happens, because that's 100% Donald Trump will win in 2020. And that's like almost like violence in the street type stuff.
Yeah, like I actually I'm very worried if they treat, and it's not even if they just cheat Bernie, it's more than that, because people forget the super delegates are the ones who picked the vice president, not Bernie. And that scares the hell out of
if it gets to
people.
the second ballot, you're saying?
No. Vice president, superdelegates pick. They have to approve of it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. So you get to pick, but then they have to approve it. You're saying
exactly. Well, you can recommend it, but
see, then that means that Bernie Tulsi is less likely because the superdelegates are going to not like Tulsi because she's anti-establishment.
Which is also why I think that Bernie is cleaning house. Like he's not bullshitting this time, and he's going hard. Like I mean, the other day, I'm sure you saw that letter that he sent to Neera Tanden and PAC.
Yes.
Like he was flexing.
That was a warning shot. He's like, listen.
Yeah, bro. I was like, oh, I love. Well, I'm like, where is this Bernie at most of the time? People don't know. Exactly. It was Tad Devine who told him, who is a bad dude, and he was the one telling Bernie, don't attack Hillary. You got to be nice to her because people will say X, Y, and Z. And I try to tell people all the time, if you have not realized anything yet, they're going to say what they say about Bernie no matter what he does. No matter what.
There's no appeasing smear merchants. The nature of a smear is you can't appease it because they're going to say it no matter what. It's not based on the truth. It's not based on anything you say. It's a smear. Exactly. So yeah, I've been saying from the beginning, look, I think it's very possible that Bernie trumps the primary in the sense that the establishment, like we already kind of described, is going to throw okay, fine, here, try Biden. Oh, shit, Biden tanked in the polls immediately when he started talking. Try Beto. Oh, my God, his arms are flailing and everybody hates him. Okay, try Kamala. All right, she's doing a little bit. Okay, that might fall through. So I think it's possible Bernie trumps that primary, and then that's honestly best case scenario, I think.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, realistically, like I said, I support Tulsi, but the truth of the matter is, if Bernie wins California, and he wins it decisively, and I think that that's exactly what's about to happen. Just from the feeling that I got when I was there in LA and in San Francisco, it's over. Like, listen, it's going to be a beat down from start to finish,
dude. If we can, what we need is, and I think you're already on this page because I've seen some of what you said about this stuff already, and I think some others are coming around on this point. What we need is, as a general rule, it's not that we can't critique other candidates and even critique our own candidate. That's perfectly fine. What we need is a general alliance between Tulsi people, Bernie people, but also, honestly, I would even throw in half of the Yang people and half of the Elizabeth Warren
people.
Well,
Yang takes corporate money, man. That shit just doesn't sit right with me.
Here's the thing about
But his supporters, I get.
Oh, shit. Our thing just ended. That was weird. Niko, you still there? You still there, Niko? Niko, you there?
Yeah, man, I got kicked out of my own live stream. What kind of
shit? I didn't know if that was my end or your end.
My end, definitely. I don't know what the hell. That's crazy. I never got.
You were saying about Yang.
So I was saying, like, I have like his supporters who generally seem to be progressive. We do need them to push Yang to give his delegates to whoever the prominent person is at the time.
Yeah. See, I think the thing about Yang is you're right about the corporate money thing. There's a couple other positions he has that I just flat out don't like his sunset clause on regulations, which I think is crazy. He's got some weird stuff about like regulating speech online that I was like, what is this?
Oh man, he said that CNN was 99.9 right 99.9% of the time. I was like, whoa,
there's plenty of stuff that's concerning there. But here's the thing though. In the case of Yang, I think it's one of those things where the bottom line is he just leans libertarian on a lot of issues. So it's not that I don't think he's like corrupted necessarily, and I don't think he's sold out to the establishment. I just think his ideology is genuinely different from your ideology and my ideology. So he leans in because his entrepreneur background. What's that?
I think that he's generally naive. That could
be it too. But his entrepreneur background, I think, influences his ideology too much. But having said that, since his main thing is UBI, since he says he's for Medicare for all, he's got like he still has left-wing genuine followers,
Yeah.
and we can get half of them on our side. You know what I mean?
Easily. And let's say I think that Yang is actually a nice guy. I don't think there's anything like, you know, fundamentally wrong with his line of thinking as far, because I see where his logic is coming from. I'm like, okay, when he's thinking like that, I guess I can see how he gets his conclusions. His conclusions are like aren't applicable in the real world. That's another thing too. I want people to try to understand, like, when I love UBI, like, but I'm not going to cut entitlement programs and then say you have to choose between Social Security and UBI to get UBI. That's stupid. The whole point is supposed to supplement, you know.
Agreed.
So, because otherwise you have literally no social mobility. In fact, you probably have a reduction or increase in income inequality after a certain point.
Yeah.
Just because you get an extra $1,000 a month. You live in New York, right?
Yes.
Yeah, $1,000 a month. If you're a single mother with a family of 3 and you got to get your food stamps cut, you get an extra $1,000 a month. How far does that go to New York? It doesn't go very far.
Yeah, if it's a net benefit cut, then I just flat out don't support it. But if we're talking about supplemental, like on top of everything else, then I'm 100% for it. And I think it's a great idea.
Might damn near get my vote for that shit if it was supplemental.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so exactly. But I agree, we do need his supporters more than anything, you know.
Yeah.
And he does have he doesn't have a political history, so he doesn't get attacked. You know, the biggest attack that the mainstream has on him, white supremacists like him. Okay, join the fucking club. They like literally white supremacists looking for the flavor of the month.
Yeah, and yeah, I hate that. Again, the guilt by association thing I just don't like, because I think it's just, what are you supposed to do if you in no way, shape, or form endorse their bigotry or hatred, but yet some of them still flock to you for whatever weird reason? Like, what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do?
And the truth of the matter is, they understand that if everybody benefits from the same policy, then they're going to benefit more than other people if they're white males in a vacuum. And that's just, and they are aware. It's like, if we stop going to war, like one of the reasons Richard Spencer, because he understands that refugees flood the country and then there are less white males,
Right. So he got to the right position from the wrong start.
Exactly. Like, is that Tulsi's fault, for example? No.
Yeah, it's crazy to draw those lines, and that always annoyed me. That's always one of the hackiest things, is guilt by association. And the people have always done it. I mean, this is the shit. It's like when back early on, before Obama even won his election, and they tried to say, like, Reverend Jeremiah Wright said this or that in his thing, and it's like, who gives a fuck?
Yeah, that was like, I was kind of confused. I wasn't even making. I'm like, what do you do? Like.
Yeah, he did. That's the thing. I always hated those attacks because they're just the lowest level form of an attack. But yeah, we could even half the Elizabeth Warren people. I don't know if you saw, but right before we did this, I kind of went at Nate Silver because he said something dumb yet again, where he was trying to say, like, Bernie people, it's not like they support Bernie because they're leftists. It's like, what the fuck? He said something crazy.
Support him? I don't
because they want to burn down the system or something.
Huh?
Like, the whole thing is, these are the ideas and policies we want implemented. Like, that's the heart of it. And if you can't see that that's the heart of it, Nate, like, what do you think? We just want to cause havoc for havoc's sake? Like, no, there's very specific reasons. So anyway,
we're not anarchists. We're not anarchists. We just want to not die. That's all we want to have is Medicare for all, so we can just have a chance to not die if we get cancer.
Exactly. Maybe. Now, let me ask you about the polling situation, because when I look at the polls, I think, first of all, every single poll that has Biden leading, dismiss it. Because, and I'll tell you why. Because every time you dig into the methodology, they just undersample younger voters. And in any scenario where Bernie Sanders wins, you have to, like, have way more young people in your analysis, because he's going to turn out young people like crazy.
Yeah, we're the largest voting bloc right now.
But then also for Tulsi too, like, I see a lot of support for Tulsi online. Now, is that me biased in my sphere, or is that, like, because when she polls it like 1%, 2%, I'm like, that can't be right.
So whenever I am analyzing polls, I always try to analyze it from the perspective of, I am being biased. So let me go to the other side of the spectrum to see, like, what's the worst case scenario. So I tried to compare that Emerson poll, for example, Julian Castro and Tulsi, because of the similarity, their proximity in fundraising. Like, they're kind of close in the polls. Both were somewhat unknown, but and then I even try to use Yang as well. So Yang is polling better than Tulsi, and I was like, that's kind of weird, but let me see the logic. And he also has more individual donations than Tulsi. So I'm like, I could buy that, because it was like 3% to 1%. But here's the problem, and this is where I got like kind of irritated. Julian Castro is polling better than Tulsi at about 2 to 3%. But Julian Castro hasn't even met the qualification for the debate.
No,
52,000 and that's with, he takes every type of money you could think of. It's only at 52,000. So how could he? And then of course you go look at the margin of error for the damn Emerson poll. Man, shit says 5.2%. 5.2%.
Why even do the poll?
Yes, thank you. People don't get that shit. I'm like, bro, 5.2% is insane. Like, so you could either be totally unimportant or you could be in second place. Like, that's where we're at right now. Come on. But I think you're right. It was so CNN uses this company called SRSS. They're same polling company used by like MSNBC and all these fucking hack mainstream places. And I was looking at one of the polls, namely the one that CNN had put out maybe a month ago, that was saying that Biden was still doing better than Bernie by a lot. And I'm like, hold up. I know I'm looking at the poll and I'm like covering this live and looking at the poll. I'm like, hold the fuck up. Are you telling me they didn't ask anybody below 50?
No. I know what you're talking about. And I thought the same thing, but it wasn't that they talked to nobody below that age. It was just they didn't talk to a lot below that. But I know what you're talking about. It said 0 in the poll, which is why everybody got confused.
Well, there was one that legitimately said, because they were breaking down, they said people above 50 and then people below 50. And I was like, hold on. And then it said, then it had 65 and older. So the numbers, the actual number, it said that they asked, and I did the math too. It said that they didn't ask anybody below 50. And it made sense because last election, they did the same thing to Bernie, where when they figured out that he was so popular amongst young people because they put together a strong college grassroots like effort. He was ridiculously popular amongst the youth. And they were like, hell no, we can't. Because that's the only way you can justify having Joe Biden and beating Bernie in any poll. It's only as basically old people.
It has to be.
And I want to know what questions they're really asking and how they're phrasing these questions. Obviously it's getting tedious because it's like, are you asking, do they know the person?
Yeah. And like, really, Buttigieg is in third now? Like, how? How did that happen?
I have no idea who he is.
Nobody knows who he is, but it's been nonstop glowing praise of him on TV. Yeah. Like obnoxious, super obnoxious.
Obvious. It's like super obvious who they're pushing. And in my opinion, it bodes well for the progressive movement because the mainstream has never been reflective of the results.
That's very true. Yeah. Like there's this sense online, like, I mean, it is what we do is just by definition organic. We just get on here and start talking and then people come and start chatting in the chat or whatever. Like that is as organic as it gets. Yeah. And the sense that I get on YouTube, on Twitter, like it's just, it reflects a different reality about the election than anything you hear in the mainstream at all.
Yeah,
like,
which really, is not good for the mainstream.
Even Biden, the second he opens his mouth, I guarantee you he tanks in the polls, man. I guarantee you. Because it happened 100%. Other times. Like,
and he's so full of himself. Like
that's so true. And then every time, like, why is it he's already trying to like run to the middle? Like, it's not, it's the primary, you
and nobody's even pushing him there. Like, yeah.
He was like,
he's right. That's what makes it even worse.
He did some sort of speech where what did he say? He said like, they're coming after me because I'm friends with a lot of Republicans. He's like, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. Like trying to be witty about it. It's like, no, the problem is that you agree with them on mad shit. That's the problem.
The problem is we kind of forget you're a Democrat sometimes because you mostly agree with them. Like, you work with them to pass the Patriot. Oh yeah, man, I'm waiting for that. I'm sure you're waiting for the day that Biden announced too, because woo, that's gonna be a fun day.
Oh my God, he's gonna get this. I read the article the other day. He's gonna try to he's gonna posture himself as I'm the third term of Obama. That's how he's gonna run. Now, the hilarious irony of that is, well, first of all, you and I both agree. Obama. Like as if we're all yearning for that. No, we need to move forward. We need to like really make this country what it's supposed to be. But I covered a story the other day, and I didn't even know about this until recently. Joe Biden, early on in his career, literally made it a key issue of his to argue against busing desegregation.
Yeah. I found out the other day.
You're going to try to run as the extension of the first black president of the United States when one of your first issues in politics was arguing against busing desegregation. Yeah. I mean, that is so slimy.
But it's like I said, it's the fucked up part about Biden is after a while, once you kind of understand the philosophy behind his success and where he's at right now, is like you're unsurprised by the things that he is saying and the confidence, because he's never been held accountable for anything he's done ever. I mean, he loses elections, like as far as a presidential, but then he was made vice president after he was trash. And somebody told him, man, you'd make a great vice president, though. You really balanced out Obama. Like, huh?
Yeah.
Like, that's what happens. You're an utter failure. You've passed
why Obama
policy.
Why Obama picked him, right?
What, for foreign policy purposes?
No, he picked him because he wanted to, as the first black president, he wanted, like, you know, the old Uncle Joe, like the old white dude that he doesn't appear to be too, like, oh, a black guy, we can't have him running the country. We better get like an old white guy.
He capitulated to the white establishment so much. And as a person who's mixed race, because I am mixed race, I'm black, but I'm mixed race, I'm half white. Like, as a person who is mixed, I understand the struggle of identity, especially when your father, who is black and you look most like him, isn't in your life at all. I mean, he called himself Barry growing up. And then you could tell that his entire presidency, he was more worried about being liked than doing the right thing. Like, bro, that was it for me. Whenever he passed, when he militarized the police force, that was it for me. I was like, oh my God.
For me, it was the drone strikes.
How relentless he was.
Because there were a lot of articles coming out that like went into detail about the drone strikes, and it was just a giant increase over Bush. And I was like, come on. And then the stories were coming in about how so many civilians were being killed. And I was like, come on, man. But you know, the thing is, and this is neoliberalism in a nutshell, is that a guy like Obama was trying to be as reasonable as possible within the confines of the system and within the Overton window in Washington, D.C. So like in that narrow ass spectrum, which is far off to the right and super corporate, he was like, I'm being so reasonable over here. I mean, look, I'm trying to give more people healthcare. Sure, I did it by keeping the private insurance companies completely in control. Sure, I did it by just tweaking around the edges. Sure, I did it by still having millions of people uninsured, even under a best case scenario with my bill. But hey, I got some more people healthcare, so aren't I like a hero over here? And that's always been the problem, especially for young people. Young people look at that kind of politics and they think, if all we have at our best is these technocratic tweaks around the edges to mildly improve people's lives, then what's the point? Like, no, you need to radically change this system to make it more fair and give people equal opportunity and bring about justice.
Yeah, it's so crazy to me that like Medicare for all is considered something radical. But I will say that the thing that bothers me about Yang, like the first time that kind of made me raise an eyebrow, was like, yeah, I love Medicare for all. And he said, so the reason I support the public option, I was like,
I saw that too.
You letting it up. Bring that back, homie. You ain't about to slide that by, because if anybody remembers when Obamacare came out, it started off as the public option.
Yep, that's right.
And because once again, he take a lot of money from corporatists. He seems to love, and Yang seems to me who is somebody else who wants to be liked. Yeah. And so, I don't want to piss off my Democratic friends, but I don't want the Republicans to think I'm unreasonable and like, no. I need Medicare for all. Like, there is no ifs, ands, or buts, even a little bit on Medicare for all. Yeah, I'm willing to bend on so many things. That is not it.
Yeah, he said, I remember this. It was in the CNN town hall. He was like, so the reason I'm on the side of Medicare for all public option is he slipped it in.
Bro, I know you was like, hold the fuck up. What did you just say? No.
The thing is, we need everybody to be on that same level where you saw that immediately, I saw that immediately, but that's because we're political junkies and we know about this stuff. Some people just watch that and thought, well, that's what? He just said some normal thing.
He said public and option. Those are both things that I like.
Exactly.
Nah, homie. There's a reason that we don't have that like in any of the Medicare for all. And what's crazy about Medicare for all is like at this point, it's such a no-brainer. Like when almost 70% of the country spanning across all of the ideologies, like, bro, can we have some fucking healthcare, please? Like, just agree. Agree to it. You will always be on the right side of the argument to the point where you can have both parties, because both parties are going to disagree with you at first about whether or not Medicare for all is the right thing to do. Guess what? Don't fucking matter. When you're on your high horse as president, point at both of them assholes and be like, bruh, Americans, go to the White House right now, go to Capitol Hill and protest. You can do that when you're the president.
See, that's it. See, Niko, I would vote for you if you ran for office because you just explained to me right there. That's the answer. And that's, by the way, even a lot of candidates who I like still don't get that. And honestly, Elizabeth Warren's perfect example of this. Like, she still says stuff like, oh, you know, at the core of healthcare, the reality is the Republicans are evil, bad, terrible, and what they stand for is more people losing their healthcare. And on the Democratic side, the core of it is all the same. Like, we all want the same thing, which is more people getting covered. But what she does is she conflates Medicare for all, public option, and all the different Democratic proposals. What you described is the only way we're actually going to make this thing work. And that's number one, to have somebody in office who is 100% unapologetic on this issue, where he's not willing to bend a goddamn inch. He or she is not willing to bend a goddamn inch. And then, yes, you have to leverage the power of the people. Because when you have 70% of the people on your side, you're supposed to leverage the power of the people. You're supposed to give an address from the Oval Office and say, number one, I want everybody to come here and protest and let everybody know what the deal is. And number two, I want you to flood the phone lines of every single person who's not going to vote for this piece of legislation.
Exactly.
So, and if you can't do that, and that's why FDR, on the stuff that FDR was good on, that's why he was so good on it, is because he twisted arms.
Yeah, he would talk to the American people. I mean, you remember his fireside chats where he would be talking to the American people, telling them, this is what we need to do. This is why it's beneficial. Here's what you all need to do to help us make it happen. And they would bend at his every will, mostly for good reasons.
Yep.
And that's one of the things that frustrates me so much about Bernie at times. Sometimes like when it comes to minimum wage, I mean, the dude, he does exactly what we're saying. But then, like, for example, people are like, well, we can't talk about Assange because it's a controversial topic. No, 90% of his supporters don't believe that Assange should be in jail right now. There's nothing controversial about it. Yeah. And with the platform that Bernie has, he's not losing a single supporter over the Assange issue.
Well, that's the thing. And I've been trying to, like, I know some people who are part of the campaign. I don't have a direct line to Bernie, but I've tried, like, there's this thing that Corey Lewandowski, who was Trump's campaign manager at one point, said about Trump, where everybody was trying to micromanage Trump. Everybody in the Republican establishment was like, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. And Corey Lewandowski was like, you got to let Trump be Trump. Now, you and I know in our heart of hearts what his actual position is on Julian Assange is, this is crazy. This is an assault on a free press. But there was a political calculation that went on in his,
it's obvious,
and my whole point would be, I fucking wish I was in the room with them. I'd be like, fuck all your political calculations. The whole reason you're in this position in the first place, where you're the front runner and everybody knows you, is because you kept it real your entire time in office, and now you're gonna not keep it real.
You literally did not give a fuck in 2015. You were saying any and everything coming
because he didn't think he could win, so he was just keeping it real. But now he feels like he's got something to lose.
And what people have to, exactly, and that's when it comes. Like I said, every politician, no matter who they are, has an ego. Like, you have to have one, like, in order to deal with this. But the problem with that is, if we as leftists say, well, we're going to hurt him if we critique him, like, well, you don't want to hurt him or hurt his chances, but at the same time, you do want the air that he may lose support so that he will go left, or at least so Venezuela, he moved left on. Whereas before he would call Maduro a dictator, he stopped doing it. And then he stopped calling for United States aid and the United States intervention. Says if there's going to be any intervention, it needs to be through the international community, because we know our history. And that was good enough for me. I'm like, okay, so he does listen to rationality, but it has to have a chance to be presented to him. And I do think that there is a level, like you said, of political calculation. I'm not going to lie. Your boy Ro Khanna been pissing me off lately, dog.
Yeah, there's times he pissed me off where I'm like, what are you doing?
Like kissing Rachel Maddow ass. You know, he said today that Bernie's campaign and Clinton need to meet up and like have some type of reconciliation for unity for the Democratic Party. He said it today.
Here's what they don't understand. Here's what he doesn't understand, and what a lot of people don't understand. You don't have to kiss the ring of the most disliked politician in American history.
Right? Like, where's the logic at?
And like what people also don't get is her supporters are not, there's a very, very tiny number that are diehard Hillary supporters. The overwhelming majority, the polls showed that people who voted for Hillary, like 90 or 95% of them or something, have a positive view of Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. So the trolls online are not emblematic of actual voters, people. Those it's
like saying about Trump, like when he was running, like, bro, you got to go kiss the ring of Romney. That's laughable. Romney lost and he sucks. Why would you have to kiss the ring? Well, you got to get the Romney diehards. There are no Romney diehards.
There's literally not a.
That's not a thing.
It's so frustrating, right?
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating.
Like the Unity Commission was beneficial for Bernie. That's why he did it. It wasn't about kissing the ring. It wasn't actually about, like, he didn't give a shit about the Unity. He's like, I'm about to have all my people in this. Like, I want to sit at the table. And it's only I'm going to be able to get it. So I'll put it on the front because it's beneficial. But sitting down with Clinton would hurt him.
Yeah, that's exactly right. See, the problem is this, Niko. Their conventional wisdom is so strong because when you're in that bubble in Washington, D.C., where all these politicians are, so many things that you and I look at and we're like, what the fuck? They view it as a duh. Like, they think like, well, duh, like Hillary was the last nominee, so you gotta go do that and unity and blah, blah, blah. But conventional wisdom is reliably wrong. Like, it is wrong very often. So it's hard for us, for outsiders, it's hard to pop that bubble, even for people who mean well. Like, I think Ro Khanna means well. I think Rashida Tlaib means well. I think AOC means well. But there are times they've let us down because that pull of conventional wisdom is just so strong at all times. And then people like us, when we say, no, don't do that, they think we're like, crazy lefties who, don't have common sense. It's like, no, there's a reason why, like, we have big shows because people go, oh, they're keeping it real. So
and have been right. Have been right.
Exactly. So it's when I'm telling you something and I'm trying to help you, it's because I'm letting you know, like, you are not keeping it real on this and you have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like so for my biggest critique of AOC, and I don't have too many, but when she stopped supporting the OFF Act and then simultaneously pushed the Green New Deal to no end, like, it irritated the hell out of me because
I think Venezuela, she let me down the most, right? Didn't she not?
Well, she retweeted Elon, but didn't say anything about it, basically.
Yeah.
And that was it. I'm like, I mean, shit, that's better than getting it wrong. So I guess, but like, don't pretend to play stupid. And I think that the fame is getting her. I think she likes being the most popular politician on Twitter. I think she loves it.
I think that's definitely true. But I'm also just annoyed at the general dynamic that, like, think about the far right politicians and what they do all day. Like, they will sit there and tweet shit like
stupid shit
or fucking tax cuts, and they, like, all day is relentless. And then you go to what's supposed to be the far left, the people who are supposed to be on our team, and we get a cornerstone issue that pops up like Venezuela. And do we see, like, all day long, don't go to Venezuela? They totally avoid it. All you hear is, shh.
Oh, no, I lied. Tulsi does it.
Tulsi led on that issue, and she gets massive credit for that.
Elon got it right.
Ilhan Omar and Ro Khanna got it right, although Ro Khanna did the caveat tap dance that a lot of people do, like
Maduro may be a dictator. No, he's not. He's literally not. But okay.
So, but that's the thing, is that's what frustrates me oftentimes, is that I want that same kind of a powerful echo chamber talking point machine that then shifts conventional wisdom to what it should be. Like, the conventional wisdom should be, what the fuck does Venezuela have to do with us?
Yeah,
that should be conventional wisdom. Like, what Venezuela? We're talking about Venezuela. We're bombing 8 different countries right now. You want to add another one?
Maduro is killing and imprisoning all of his opposition. Okay, well, who's Guaido then? I'm confused. I thought he should be in prison if he's considered the opposition. Why is he not in prison right now if he's the opposition?
Yeah,
because maybe it's not true. Maybe he's not actually.
There's a lot of propaganda. There's a lot of propaganda. They always try to make the case that whoever is the official state enemy is like the worst person in the world. And honestly, if people are skeptical on that point, go back, and Jimmy's done a few segments on this. Go back to the first Gulf War, and the lies were immense. I mean, the lies were like Saddam and his people throwing babies out of incubators and killing them. And it's like, what the fuck? And at the time, if you said, I don't know about all that, they'd call you a monster. You'd be called a monster if you're like, I don't know if I buy that. Oh, really? I guess you fucking love dictators. Yep. And it's the same script over and over and over.
But you can go back to Cuba. I'll talk about it on my show pretty regularly, especially living in Miami. So right now, Cuba's 70% black. People don't know that. But before, it was quite the opposite. And as you can imagine, considering this is during segregation time, then Fidel actually was able to take over Cuba because he's like, hey, y'all, I'm going to not allow America to run our shit, and I'm going to desegregate. And everybody was like, well, shit, we can get down with that. And he never lost power. And the reason why is because, well, they have a 50% male, 50% female legislature. They discovered a cure for fucking lung cancer, put it in an inhaler. They have the best medical school in the world. They've been using the same car since 1930, and they're completely cut off from the Western world and are able to achieve all this. And this man supposedly some crazy, brutal dictator. And I'm like, there's some stuff not adding up. So then I started doing more research, and I was like, found out the guy right before Fidel. Which is why they started focusing on Fidel so much. Batista, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And he was America's puppet. And then you find out Fidel was the one trying to help Nelson Mandela, and we were the one propping up the apartheid in South Africa.
That's right.
And then you start figuring, you're like, oh my God, everything I've ever learned is wrong except for the fucking names that they use.
Man. That's totally true.
Once you operate from that place, you can start to, when you hear narratives being pushed immediately, it's like a second sense. That's bullshit.
That's right. Yeah. And it is still, it's kind of amazing that to this day, like the fact that I just covered the story, John Bolton, there's an article in Politico that says John Bolton is trying to make like anti-socialism a 2020 issue, like the main 2020 issue. And he was given a speech, and he was doing the whole stupid troika of tyranny thing where he's like, we got to go after Venezuela. We got to go after Nicaragua. We got to go after, there was one other in there. And like, he genuinely believes, and Politico ran with the article like stenography for John Bolton, that like, oh yeah, this is something that'll sell. Like, yeah, toppling more countries in the year 2020. Like that's going to sell to the American people. Meanwhile, like, you know, people in this country are struggling to pay the bills. We got 78% of people living paycheck to paycheck. Our infrastructure is crumbling, but you know, people don't even have goddamn health care. And you think people are going to go like, you know, that John Bolton is right. We really got to go topple the Nicaraguan government. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, man. And people are really in bond. Well, first of all, they fucked up because they made it so that you can't get a decent job without being college educated. And now we've all been in college. We're like, hold the fuck up. You lied to us about some things along the way, didn't you? You know, it's kind of like it's coming back and biting them in the ass. But like when I do wish though that whenever, for example, if Bernie gets asked on like, oh, what about all these countries that say socialism has always failed? I'm like, oh, I always say, especially when I get like I debated Anomaly and that topic came up, I was like, oh, which countries has it failed? They were like, well, look at Venezuela, of course, right? I'm like, you mean because of the sanctions? Did it fail before or after the sanctions? Because actually, if you look at it statistically, quote unquote, socialism was the only reason that Venezuela started to be like rising under Chavez. And then once we got involved, America got involved, that's when it started plummeting. So once capitalism got involved, that's when it started plummeting. When you look at Canada's medical or healthcare single payer system, it got worse when private insurance companies were allowed to get involved. So like, and you go down the list, we sabotage any country, and I'm actually for mixed economies.
Any brown countries that try to do
brown company, because you don't ever hear, what about Germany?
That's
there's socialism.
And by the way, you can try to make that case if you want in a debate, but there's I think it's just a simpler, easier response. Just be like Denmark, Sweden, Norway.
Because they all have it's part because they have mixed, because then they start talking about taxes, and I love when they go to taxes. I'm like, oh, word. So you're saying Sweden and Norway have higher taxes on like groceries and stuff like that? Like, yeah, like could it have anything to do with their agriculture? Like, have you actually done research on, or the lack thereof? Like, have you done research on these things? Or are you just literally quoting some talking points that you've heard every single other person quote and are trying to accept it as fact because you don't really want to crush your bubble? Because that's what it is. Like, little things can be like a lot of things like increase, like a ridiculous increase in taxes can be explained if you just did a little research.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than that exact talking point of like, well, socialism, like why Soviet Union's bad. And it's like, oh my God, like look at the lengths you go to make your hacky point. I mean, God damn it.
They only co-opted the word communism because it was so popular at the time.
Yeah, there's a weird history there. And for me, everybody knows I'm internationally, I'm pretty moderate. In the context of the US, I appear to be far left, but I believe in social democracy. I believe in mixed economies, and I think that's the evidence shows that that's the best. But yeah, there has been a concerted effort for a long time in this country to try to equate anything left of the actual center with communism, authoritarianism, with dead bodies piling up, with Pol Pot, with Stalin. And it honestly insults people's intelligence if they stop for a second and go, let me think about this critically. Because it's just sloppy thinking to try to pretend like all these different ideologies on the spectrum, whether it be communism or, you know, libertarian socialism or anarchism or other mild versions of leftism, like that's all the same. Like you're going to argue this is all the same and it's all bad.
And people also forget that like liberalism, the reason that liberalism and communism have been grouped on the left is because communism is actually what the right would consider to be like the most liberal of ideologies. That's what communism was supposed to be. It's supposed to be the people literally have control of the means of production, and like the government, even if it's quote unquote some type of centralized control, it's only to the degree that the people allow it to be. Like, and with right now, for example, when they try to say the right will say, well, do you want communism? I'm like, so what would you consider communism? Like, I don't know, maybe the CIA constantly looking into your stuff without you allowing them to, violating your privacy, you know, not being able to collect rainwater because it's illegal, which is also a right-wing policy, not being allowed to install solar panels because they don't want competition with corporations, because that would be a right-wing policy as well. I was like, as a matter of fact, all that stuff was implemented by the same people who tell you that shit is bad and that communists do it.
Yeah,
it's all on the right.
There's a strain of authoritarianism on the right, and like you pointed out with NSA spying, for example. And I don't think they recognize that like this is exactly the kind of stuff that you guys argue against communism because you're afraid it's going to bring this about. But it's actually, we actually have it right now,
and they call it patriotism here.
Right. Like, yeah, oh, you got something to hide? Why do you care that people are, you know, the government's like spying in on you? But the thing that's crazy is that, you know, and definitely going, and I gotta wrap it up soon, but going back to Ben Shapiro, just to come full circle here, like there's no way he knows the difference between the different strains of ideology on the left, because there's statist versions of leftism and there's anti-statist versions of leftism. So one of the policies that now is becoming widely popular because it's a very easy thing to do, and it's not some sort of grand reform that has to go to some giant centralized government. It's just worker-owned co-ops. That's what we call democratizing the workplace. You know? And that, like, you talk to even conservatives about that. Like, hey, how would you feel if, you know, at the local factory, instead of like a bunch of elites who make $3 million a year each wearing expensive suits, instead of them making the decision to shut down the factory and outsource the jobs to China, what if you guys were in on that meeting too, and you all had an equal vote with your management?
Like in Italy.
They go, and what would they say? They'd be like, that's a wonderful idea. Right. Well, that's one version of leftism right there. Democratizing the workplace, worker-owned co-ops. That's democracy in the workplace. That's a leftist policy. That's a leftist idea. So that flies in the face of what their perception of leftism is. And people go, wait, hold on. That's weird. I didn't think, I never thought of it like that before.
Because they always say we love big government. I don't know where they get that from.
Yeah. I mean, in some, like, I get that characterization on some issues. Like if you ask me, hey, do you like big government in healthcare? I say, fuck yeah, I do. Like we should have that. Like the NHS is arguably the best healthcare system in the world, and that's tax money going to public institutions. That's all government. So in some ways, I like that. But listen, you're telling me they don't like big government on some issue? They love big government. They want the biggest military the world has ever seen times 1,000,000,000. So it's like those kind of like simplistic characterizations that they use. It's just so.
Like, I just want fiscal conservatism. It's like, hold up. I don't think you know what that means if you are okay with the Republicans or the right.
Especially if they're cheering Trump's tax cuts, added over $1 trillion to the deficit, and they're talking about fiscal conservatism. Oh, please.
Yep, exactly.
So those notions don't do us much good because it's a much more complex conversation.
So I want to ask you really quick before we go. So for those of, I'm sure everybody here knows this by now, you were one of the co-founders of the Justice Democrats, and they have a lot of achievements that I'm sure you're more than proud of. You know, there's a lot of critiques. I'll tell you one of the things I love about him, and I'll give you one of my critiques. And I would love for you to talk about like kind of how it started, where you got the idea from, and how it's kind of unfolded and what you've learned, from the experience. One of the biggest things I loved about Justice Democrats was because people like AOC came from it, right? So it's inspired so many people, and a lot of the stories that aren't being told, like AOC's, around the country. Young people actually believe they can fight the system and win. And that's a beautiful thing because, in my opinion, when you hear people like Kamala have to lie about the fact she supports Medicare for all, it's proof that we're winning, right? Because we're controlling the narrative now. So my main critique was, I feel like when not necessarily when you personally, but more like when TYT got 100% behind it, it became a conflict of interest because they became completely invested in the success of one party. And although I saw that you had the ability to kind of separate that and still be able to critique the Democrats, like legitimately, they weren't able to do that. And that's what I was worried about, because when you become invested in success of one party and your dollar, your bottom line is all of a sudden started relying on it, it's a little bit more difficult for you to bring yourself to make critiques when necessary. So those are the two that the good things about it that I loved. And then it was like, that was the one critique that I had about it. And then some of the other stuff that unfolded later after you left, but that's a different discussion. So like, what was it that made you create the Justice Democrats? Would you have done anything differently? And like, what did you learn?
What would I don't know what I would have done differently. I think that honestly, it was as successful, if not more successful than we could have ever imagined in such a short amount of time. As far as your criticism goes, yeah, it's a tough line to walk, because you don't want to be cheerleaders, right? But you also don't want to be overly critical to the point where you're undermining the success of the organization and like undercutting it. But you want to be you want to criticize constructively, where you're not tearing anything down, you're building it up, but you're also being honest about the downfalls and the shortfalls. And I think that, in all seriousness, 95% of people are just utterly incapable of finding that proper line to work.
It's true.
Yeah, because it sometimes, you'll get the people, and I got into a giant back and forth. I remember this with YouTube host named Sane Progressive at the time, because in my opinion, she was going way too far in the direction of the tear it down, where her whole philosophy was like, this isn't even worth it. It's not going to work. Fucking stop it. And my whole thing was like, well, no, after every fucking election where we don't get the outcome we want, everybody's like, bro, we really should do something about this.
Yeah.
And then we finally fucking did something, and then somebody steps up and like, why are you doing this? It's like, no, because we all agree we needed to do something. What are you talking about?
I 100% agree. I agree.
But then I take your criticism too, though, because then the other end of the spectrum is you don't want to end up being like, no, none of the Justice Democrats ever did anything wrong. I don't see anything wrong ever about anything. So I'm not going to like that. Also is dishonest, and I don't like that either. So yeah, it's tough to find that line where you're doing constructive criticism and you're furthering a goal, but you're also being honest about the outcomes and trying to,
see, so if the model was more similar to, I guess, our revolution, which it isn't exclusively Democrat, or at least the name doesn't even imply exclusivity in that regard. And like when Nina came out, I was like, I don't give a damn if you're Republican, Democrat, Green Party, Libertarian. If you have the most progressive platform, then we'll endorse you. And I think that would have probably been a little bit more like consistent, I guess, and like easier to navigate even, because now you get to go, you never know. Maybe you do have a libertarian who's mostly progressive. Like maybe you get a Yang in the situation where he doesn't take lobbying money and he's the most progressive in the race and it looks good. And that way he may be running as a libertarian, but now you can still call him a justice whatever because of, you're not loyal to the success it's not necessary to keep the Democrat moniker attached to it. So I guess that's like one of my only critiques. Cause I know that you, and I got to say a lot of respect for you. Cause I have my disagreements with Cenk, but trying to hold something over his head from something he did 10 years ago or 12 or 15 years ago is ludicrous when it's 90%, 80% of the country was homophobic until 5 years ago. Yeah. So like, I respected you for saying like, look, come on, like this is ridiculous. Because all of those people who are pointing fingers, I'm sure we could have found something on them just as easily.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because when you're in an organization and you're one of the leaders of an organization, there's so much that goes on just at the basic human level of like managing what's happening. It's almost impossible, because what happens when you're in a situation like we found ourselves in, where there was basically like a staff revolt and they're like, it's him or us. Well, if he's gone, that's one of the leaders of the movement gone. If you guys are gone, how are we even going to proceed with the entire staff gone? It's just like, it's this incredible conundrum that you're trying to find a way out of. And to your point about running as Democrats, all these conversations were had and extensively when we were trying to figure out exactly what we're doing with this, because you're correct. And actually brand new Congress, which preceded Justice Democrats, and we teamed up with some of the founders of Brand New
Remind me
Congress.
offline. I need to talk to you about that, by the way.
Okay. But Brand New Congress, they were doing what you described, which is, I don't care if you're Republican, I don't care if you're an independent, I don't care if you're a Democrat. All we care about is being uncorrupted. And then even when it came to the platform in Justice Democrats, we were having the internal debates of what is our litmus test and what exactly are we holding the candidates to? And so some people were on the side of just no corporate money and we're all set, like no corruption and we're all set. And then other people were on the side of like, not enough. It's got to be that. It's got to be Medicare for all. It's got to be a living wage.
Mm-hmm.
And so those conversations were being had. And here's my takeaway from that. It is never a clean, easy process when you're dealing with organizations. It is so much easier when you're as an individual, when you're making your own decisions and controlling something and you're the leader. That is just so much easier than dealing with this giant bureaucracy where even if you try to make the bureaucracy run as smooth as possible, it's still a goddamn bureaucracy and it's hard to get it all to work.
Some of the people on the board were like former establishment that were supposedly, kind of like converted into progressives. I
don't know about that because the guy who you're talking about, one guy is named Zach Exley, and he was formerly with Move On. And then the point that some people were making is like, well, Move On had taken money from like some Soros affiliated group or something.
I'm not even worried about it. Well, Zach Exley, personally, so he tried to sink Tim Canova's campaign, and Tim Canova actually had to fire him. He was the first person. Tim Canova was the first person that Zach Exley actually talked about Brand New Congress with.
Okay, first of all, I did not know that. And second of all, I'm really surprised because in all of the conversations that I had with him behind the scenes at Justice Democrats, I was always like, damn, this guy's really reasonable. But
he's good at that.
Stunning to me.
It's an interesting story. You should talk to Tim about it one day. He will be more than happy to tell you the whole story. It was to the point where not only Zach, but the people that Zach brought to the campaign were trying to sink Tim. And like telling him not to go after Democrat. All the things that you would expect people to say. And this is like I said, this is whenever I first got onto the scene on YouTube and things like that was because I was exposing a lot of the moles, which is actually a political norm, especially in political a popular federal campaigns, whether it's for the House, Senate, or for the White House. And Zach X was actually one of these people. And Tim had to fire him because of how corrupt he was. Wow. And then he moved on to the Brand New Congress. And then Brand New Congress was actually doing something. Like I caught them running people against progressives in some areas. Like there was no logic or reason. But I'm like, maybe it was just an accident. And so that was where a lot of people were kind of getting frustrated. And I know you're at dealing with the macro. So you don't see all the time the micro. Like, for example, Sima Hernandez kind of flew under your radar at first for all of you all. And then Cenk actually apologized to her, which I had a lot of respect for, saying we got that shit wrong with Beto. Our bad. That's what happens at the micro level.
It's tough. And then we were accused in California, we were accused of undercutting Hildebrand when in reality we all had the conversation and we definitely considered him, but it was our judgment that seeing how far he had gotten, he had already been running for a pretty long time and he had gotten no momentum. And so we were like, if we want to win, we can't go with him. We have to go with somebody who can get more momentum and can win. So, but then when you do that and we picked Allison Hartson, then the accusation came you only picked her because she's a woman and you're anti-male or something. And we were like, no.
I didn't come to that conclusion. I was like, well, David's, in my opinion, the clearest. But there was Pat Harris was there too. But I think he came on after y'all had already endorsed Allison Hartson.
But see, this is the thing is all these conversations we were having and there's never a clear answer. And I was naive because I'm a black or white guy, yes or no guy. I'll tell you straight.
When it comes to your progressive values. Yeah, definitely.
I come into this thing thinking everything's going to be relatively straightforward and easy, but no, everything was difficult and everything was well, how do we make this decision? How do we make that decision? And there's so many more 50-50 decisions than I would have ever imagined. And this is, perfect example of one right here talking about Hildebrand.
Yes. Well, you know what? I have to commend you because a lot of people, they pontificate, from behind the desk and never try to do anything. There's been plenty of things that I've tried and failed at, especially over the last 3 years. but that's okay because you always learn something from it. And at the very bare minimum, the people who are watching, like, they may not necessarily agree with all the decisions that Justice Democrats made, but like they're still going to have infinitely more respect for you because you try to do something. And I feel like that's what we need more. That's why I love Jimmy, because like I consider Jimmy like myself. He's an activist. He's out in the streets, and I always tell people like Jimmy's part of like the progressive economy, if you will. Ron is on his staff, his producers on his staff. And those are things that we need more of, are people willing to just say, you know what, I don't know if this is going to work 100%, but shit, we got to do something,
Yeah.
So,
sure.
well, and I thank you definitely for making that effort. And like I said, we got AOC out of it, and AOC and Ilhan was a Justice Democrat too, right?
Yes, Ilhan, Rashida Tlaib, there were a bunch of victories.
So
it's just the beginning too. They're still doing more. They're still recruiting. They're still running people. And it's just a matter. I'm no longer affiliated with the organization. Honestly, I'm just happy that I'm no longer, because I was just a headache in general. And anytime they made the wrong decision, I was blamed. Anytime they made the right decision, I never got credit. To this day, man.
To this day, I'm about to say, to this day, you don't get any credit for AOC.
It's not just AOC, to be fair, but there's like, it's a group that I co-founded, and when I say like none of the articles reference me, it's literally none.
I tagged you in one. I tagged you one on Twitter. Like, I was like, hold up, I thought Kyle was part of this.
Listen, man, I made peace with it a long time ago that like this is the actual price you pay for being an anti-establishment person, for being an outsider. The price you pay is you will never get that establishment recognition. And so I just realized, well, then fuck it. Who cares? I don't care if Newsweek mentions me in an article about this shit. I'm building my own thing over here. And the old saying goes, you build it and they will come. Okay, I'll build it and then everybody will come, and this will be our area that we'll build on our own. We don't need other people's fucking pats on the head.
Let's be honest, you get more views on a daily than Politico could probably ever hope to get. Like, let's be real.
That's right.
About it.
Right. And so, I like much more being, because you're an outsider, I'm an outsider. A lot of other people in the spaces that we're in are outsiders, and I like that more. And I'm comfortable with that fact. And I think that it lends you a certain amount of credibility that others don't have, because they know, like, oh, that's Kyle. Like, they know I'm not in no way, shape, or form am I gonna, screw them over or anything like that, because that's Kyle. Whereas if you're some fucking faceless person who's writing articles over at some establishment hack website, everybody's like, what's your angle, dude? Like, why is this I'm not sure this article is true. Like, what are you saying here? So we have more credibility than they ever could have, and that's the bottom line on it. And it's
as a final word, it's paying off, right? So before challenging the establishment area, it was good to do it, but now it's almost like, okay, if you want to find success, like legitimate, like mainstream is hurting right now. They're getting better ratings only because people are like, well, let me see what kind of bullshit they're gonna say about the elections. But then they go right to YouTube to figure out the truth and the answers, the real answers. And I've seen myself, I've benefited from it. Jimmy exponentially so. Like, people don't want anything, but can you just be genuine? Can you tell me your truth as you see it, without having a bunch of corporate money being the determining factor on whether or not you feel a certain way about a subject, a politician, or an issue? And we've seen such a steady growth of it that it's almost been like kind of like, wow, I cannot believe this many people agree with me.
Yeah.
When we're considered the outsiders.
That's right. And it's also a stylistic thing in that you and I are just having a conversation. We're just talking, and you literally don't get that if you turn on CNN. There's a facade, there's a mask, there's a filter that they put on. And that alone, on a human level, I think it's not 1984 anymore. You can't do that.
100%.
It doesn't work. People are like, why are you talking like that, bro? Whereas you and I are talking, and they're just like, that's Niko and Kyle talking, and I'm interested in what they have to say.
Yeah, so, I mean, I talk the same in person as I do on here. So
yeah, same.
So appreciate you coming on, man. We're going to go ahead and let you go. Thanks for everybody who tuned in. This is definitely a dope conversation. We'll have to do it again soon, especially as the election unfolds. And like I said, there's going to be a lot of shit talking going on. So I'm sure me and Kyle have a lot to talk about in that regard. With that being said, people, thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream segment of Casa su Casa. Remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.
Thanks, man.